How did that hit me, man? I'm invisible, bro. It's an unstoppable auto attack, so I gotta go invisible before he starts the animation, I think. God. It's okay, it's not like the end of the world, it's just annoying. I have the leeching layers, so... there's... It's fine, he's just gonna push. He hasn't even recalled yet, greedy bastard. I don't know I don't know, Simran. I can't hear my own stream. Can you hear anything? Whoa, 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 what the fuck? What the fuck is going on here? Whoa, 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 relax yourself, my guy. Cog next to desktop audio, this cog. And then what? Undo, unmute. No, but it wasn't muted. Properties. Device default. Let's go.
About this. Red light for sake of avoiding the negative effects of light later in the day and at night, then you want that red light to be very, very dim. Certainly much dimmer than is on most of those commercial products. Now, do you need red lights? No, although red lights are rather convenient because you can see pretty well with them on. But if they're dim, they won't wake up the circadian clock. They won't have this dopamine disrupting thing that we talked about in the previous podcast. So there's a role for red light potentially early in the day, and for mitochondrial repair in the photoreceptors. There's a role for dim red light later in the day and at night. So you're starting to notice a theme here, which is that there's no immediate prescription of look at these lights. It's look at these lights potentially, if that's what you want to do, at particular times of day and with particular intensities. It brings us back to the blue light issue, which is so many people are obsessed with avoiding blue light. You actually want
I'll
a
start
ton
it
of
from the
blue light
beginning
early in the
because I
day.
wasn't really listening.
Right. So we have time. Welcome to the
Huberman
Lab podcast.
This dude's busted though, like actually broken checkers. What is going on here? There's gotta be some shit to do, right?
I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. This podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. Along those lines, I want to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. I don't know his Insta, dude. Our first sponsor is Athletic Greens, which is an all-in-one vitamin mineral probiotic
Andrew
liquid
Huberman.
supplement. I've been using.
Like I only know his YouTube channel because he's got like these really information
total vitamin
dense
mineral
YouTube videos.
Base covered
yeah,
in
Andrew
one
Huberman.
easy to consume product.
But like,
it also tastes really good.
It's actually busted. This
lemon
guy.
Juice. I've been doing that for well over a decade now, and the inclusion of probiotics is important to me because there's a lot of data out there right now about the importance of gut health for the immune system, for mood. And so by combining all these things in one product, you get all those things at once. If you want to try Athletic Greens, you can go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman, and that will give you a special offer where you will get a year's supply of liquid vitamin D3 and K2. Vitamin D3 has been shown to be important for various aspects of immune function as well as other biological functions. And so once more, if you want to try Athletic Greens and get the year's supply of vitamin D3 K2, just go to athleticgreens.com/.
Alright, let me hard push this on DP.
The other sponsor of today's podcast is Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is a way to measure metabolic factors, hormones, and DNA-related factors by way of blood tests and saliva in order to assess it.
What the fuck? Some fucking shit.
I'm a big believer in blood tests and saliva tests for assessing one's health markers because I like the data. And there's really no other way to measure what's going on in one's body without taking the occasional blood test.
Oh, let's go. Oh, fuck.
What's going on. If you really want to know what's going on.
Fuck that Ezreal, man.
Inside Tracker can be of great help. One of the problems with a lot of products out there, or just regular blood testing, is that you get a lot of data
is
levels of
kind of annoying, man.
metabolic factors, etc.
Actually, a cockblock.
With those data. Great thing about Inside Tracker is it is provided in a format.
Ooh, I'm feeling the steel caps,
given
though.
your particular levels
it's just, do I need the CC
things,
reduction? I don't think so. It's just the CC reduction helps me with the Garen silence, it helps me with the Ari charm, and it helps me with the Everfrost brew, and it helps me with the
patterns.
Blitzcrank silence and the hook, so maybe Mercs is better.
Metabolic factors, hormones, etc. in the direction that you
want. Maybe Mercs is better. I'll just get the null magic.
Tracker, you can go to insidetracker.com/Huberman, and if you do that, you'll get 25% off the program at checkout. So let's get started. Today is episode 3 of the podcast, and it is office hours. Office hours, as many of you know, where students come to the office of the professor, sit down and ask questions, requesting clarification about things that were confusing, or to simply go down the route of exploring a topic with more depth and detail. I asked for your questions to be listed in the comments section of the previous 2 episodes of the podcast on YouTube as well as on Instagram. And first of all, I just want to thank you for the many questions. They are excellent. We read them all. We distilled from that large batch of questions to 2 types of questions. Questions that were asked very often and were liked very often with the little thumbs up like tab, as well as questions that we thought could really expand on the topics that we've covered previously. And today we're going to cover both of those. If we did not get to your question, please don't despair. We will keep track of those, and we have several more episodes devoted to this topic of sleep and wakefulness and learning during the month of January, maybe even leaking over a little bit into the month of February. So we have time. That's one of the unique formats of this podcast. We have time for dialogue, we have time for your questions, we have time to really go deep into these topics.
If I hard push it, I gotta push it past the river.
It's official, Costello's sleeping in the background, so if you hear snoring,
I can actually,
Costello is going to be keeping time
safely.
With his deep and melodic
snoring. If I can last hit, though.
There he goes. So, the questions that we received, I batched into a couple different categories.
I'm out.
Light,
fucking out, baby.
Exercise,
fucking out, baby. What are you doing?
Temperature, learning, plasticity, and sort of mood related. A lot of questions about those. Before we begin any of this, I want to point out something that I always say. It sounds like boilerplate, but it's important not just to protect me, but to protect you, which is that I am not a physician. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe anything, including behavioral protocols. I'm a professor, so I profess a lot of things.
I only started streaming because you stopped streaming, and Flux stopped streaming, or Gabriel.
Through whatever it is that you
so I was just like, what the fuck? What am I supposed to watch? Let me just fucking make the content instead of trying to consume it, right?
Professional before you add or remove.
But this is just a warm-up game anyway.
Protocol.
I'm on NA, so I'm on like 125 ping or whatever.
Smart with this
I'm playing in windowed modes. But I think it's not been the worst thing. Garen is like a really popular counterpick to Akali.
Okay,
because your shroud doesn't really mean anything if he's spinning, right? And silence really fucks with Garen over.
What
he's
is
not gonna stay. I don't think
the role of moonlight and fire? I'm presuming they mean fireplace or candle or things of that sort. In setting circadian rhythm.
Juicy.
Is it okay?
It's juicy and my mouse is connected, but it's juicy. I gotta wait. What's the thing that can kill me? The thing that can kill me is
candlelight be too much light? Great question. Also offers me the opportunity to share with you what I think.
Oh, that was the charm, baby.
Of what?
Oh my god, what's going on here?
So I've mentioned a few times the use of
where's the flash, man?
Light meters and things to measure things like lux, which sometimes are also described in terms of candela. So those are the 2 units for measuring light intensity. Typically, lux, L-U-X, is the unit. And so before we go forward and discuss this many lux or that many lux, I want to just tell you what a lux is because it relates to this question. 1 lux
the editing stream, right?
equals the illumination of 1 square meter surface at 1 meter away from a single candle. So somebody actually decided at some point that the amount of illumination at 1 square meter surface, 1 meter away from a single candle, that is 1 lux. So when we talk about 6,000 lux of light intensity, or 10,000 lux of light intensity, now you have a kind of a reference or a framework that would be the equivalent of, you could think of it as 6,000 candles all with their light.
It's a bit intensive to edit and stream, I think, like, for PC wise. If Garen comes, I'm just dead.
So you get the idea.
I'm gonna put a ward here.
Here's the great thing. Turns out that moonlight,
no, I can't
candlelight, and even a fireplace, if you have one of these roaring fires going on in the fireplace, do not reset your circadian clock at night and trick your brain into thinking that it's morning. Even though, if you've ever sat close to a fireplace or even a candle, that light seems very bright. And there are two reasons for that that are very important.
PC will be
the
fine,
first
but I just won't.
Is that these
Why do you not think people will want to watch? Oh, okay, this is a really short teleport, I think. Let's see.
Also called intrinsically photosensitive ganglion cells.
How?
Those cells adjust their sensitivity across the day.
Oh, I was spamming one.
To the blue-yellow
I got one. Nah, what the fuck? Why are we trying to surrender? We're 2 kills down and 1 dragon down.
Sun, also discussed in the previous episode. But those cells adjust their sensitivity such that they will not activate the triggers in the brain that convey daytime signals when they view moonlight, even a full moon, a really bright moon, or fire. Now, this does raise an interesting kind of thought point, which is, you know, a lot of people have talked about lunacy and the fact that when there's a full moon out, people act differently and behave differently. There's a lot of lore around that. There's actually a little bit of quality science around that maybe we can address in the future. But, you know, moonlight is typically not going to wake us up too much, except maybe if the moon is really full and really bright, there's possibility for that. So, provided you're not going to burn down the structure you're in, you're not going to burn down the forest, enjoy your fireplaces, enjoy your lights and candles, and those are perfectly safe without disrupting your circadian rhythm. Because we talked about just how crucial it is to avoid bright lights between the hours of about 10 p.m. except when you need to safety or work. I also received a lot of questions about red light. Now, I think I was asked those questions because red light is used in a number of different commercial products where these products tend to include a sheet of very bright.
When are you going to upload the episode? I don't know, man.
Early in the day. And there are various claims attached to these red light devices.
Some like annotations on
mitochondrial function, that they improve metabolism.
Providing value in terms of
I'm
like
going to be really honest.
Tank deadlines for the first time.
I'm not going to name particular studies because what I'm about to say about these studies is not particularly unkind, but let's just say that none of the studies that I've seen, except for one that I'll talk about in a moment, pointing to the positive effects of red light on the visual system are published in blue ribbon journals. They tend to be published in journals that I had to work hard to find. I'm not sure what the peer review and stringency level is. Now, that's not to say red light isn't beneficial, because there is one study in particular that came from Glenn Jeffrey's lab at the University of College London. It was published last year.
Presentable and social, bro. Have you seen
Glenn is somebody I happen to know. He's an excellent reputation, excellent vision scientist. What this study essentially showed, and again, this is a study that I very much like.
I should just go, right?
Very high standards. What this study shows is that viewing red light for a few minutes each morning
that's all too high HP,
can
man.
have positive effects on mitochondria and a particular retinal cell type that tends to degenerate or decline in function with age in humans. And that cell type is the photoreceptor. The photoreceptor is a type of cell in your eye that sits at the back of the eye. It's kind of some distance away from the ganglion cells, and it's the cell that converts light information into electrical signals that the rest of the retina and the brain can understand. These are vitally important cells. Without them, people are blind. And many people's vision gets worse with age, in particular age-related macular degeneration, but also related to some other factors, including photoreceptor.
What are you doing, my guy?
Red light flashes delivered early in the day, but not late in the day, can help repair the mitochondria. Now, this study needs more support from additional studies, of course. They are doing a clinical trial. They did report on what I think it was 12 patients. And so the work is ongoing, but that was very interesting. and it points to some potentially really useful things about red light.
This is not ranked.
However,
I'm like
most of the
level 20 something in NA.
For sake of office hours, were about the use of red light later in the day. So here's the deal.
I'll play ranked later though.
Red light.
This is my warm up for ranked. The way I warm up for ranked is I win a normal in Japan, and then I'll win a normal in the States. And
However,
then
most of the
I'll win a
lights,
normal in Europe West, and then I'll go into ranked, and then I'll fucking I just smurf at that point, man.
A number of,
I just actually like
health effects. Those are way too
like,
bright.
You know when
definitely wake up your body and brain. So if
when
you're going to use those
took off
products,
the
and I'm not suggesting you do,
took off
don't,
the fucking
but if that's your thing,
the weights,
you would want to use those early.
You know when he took off the weights,
you might even derive
his
some
body.
benefit on mitochondrial function.
Or when Goku fucking takes off the weights.
If you're thinking about red light for sake of avoiding the negative effects of light later in the day and at night, then you want that red light to be very, very dim, certainly much dimmer than
I fucking love Akali, man.
Most of those commercial products.
But it's like if I play a high skill champion like Akali
red lights,
with 120
red lights
ping,
are rather convenient because
and I do okay,
well with them on,
I'm gonna fucking smurf
dim,
in Europe.
They won't
That's
wake
basically
up the
the reasoning.
Clock. They won't have this dopamine disrupting thing that we talked about in the previous podcast. So there's a role for red light potentially early in the day and for mitochondrial repair in the photoreceptors. There's a role for dim red light later in the day and at night. So you're starting to notice a theme here, which is that there's no immediate prescription of
Garen
look at these lights.
I didn't like. I saw Garen picked, and then I was like, I could counterpick the Garen, but I want to learn Akali, so I'm like, fuck it, let me just go into the counterpick. Let me just suck Garen's dick, see how bad the matchup really is. I think I could have won it.
Don't wear them at all, and at night it doesn't matter if you have blue blockers on. If the lights are bright enough,
super hard at level 6.
You're still going to be activating these cells.
You didn't see the beginning of the match, did you?
Want to add something about the science behind the blue blocker
so fucking
confusion.
Hard,
so these melanopsin retinal cells do react to blue light. That is the best stimulus for one of these melanopsin cells, which led to the belief that blue blockers would be a good thing for preventing resetting of the circadian clock at night and deleterious effects of screens, etc. However, the people that made these products failed to actually read the papers start to finish, or if they did, they didn't comprehend a critical element, which is that most of those papers early on took those neurons out and put them in a dish. And when they did that, they divorced those neurons from their natural connections in the eye. Turns out in your eye and my eye right now, because that's what we care about, these cells exist. And these cells respond to blue light, but also to other wavelengths of light, because they not only respond directly to light as they do in a dish, they also respond to input from photoreceptors. So if you talk to anyone in the circadian biology field, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, this blue light thing has really gotten out of control because people assume that blue light is the culprit because blue light is the best stimulus. That doesn't mean that blue light is the only stimulus that will trigger these cells. Okay, so like many things, a scientific paper can be accurate without being exhaustive, and a lot of claims about products can be accurate but not exhaustive. So blue light during the day is great. Get that screen light, get that sunlight especially, get overhead lights. I talked about all this in the previous podcast. But at night, you really want to avoid those bright lights, and it doesn't matter if it's blue light or something else. And so there was a real confusion about the papers and the data when most of those product recommendations were made.
Yeah, this is the tragedy.
While we're on that topic, let's talk about
the
light.
Tragedy. Like, I don't know, Ramus was...
I mean, it was kind of a joke about this.
Like, I hate the meme about jungle difference. Wrote to me
and said, well, I've seen some claims that light delivered to the ears, into the ears or the roof of the mouth or up the nose can be beneficial for setting circadian rhythms.
I'm going to turn this down a little bit.
Not directly anyway. And this is a great opportunity for us to distinguish between what is commonly called the placebo effect, but a more important way to think about any manipulation, behavior or otherwise.
You know, we're trading. I hit the Q. I get the auto, so like we're doing okay. I take a bat trade.
There are a lot of things.
Like it's really hard for Akali to do anything.
Putting a couple of lights
to Garen, it's entirely skill. You have to
modulate
like
your
use your E or your W before he can start the auto attack. And then Rammus level 3 comes here and he hits the minion and then does nothing. So this is tragic. I lost a couple minions because of that. And then he stays in the bush, and I'm like, I feel like this is really obvious. So I don't know how I feel about it. So I'm just gonna trade anyway because whatever. And then he just comes out. He doesn't even wait for his Powerball cooldown or anything. I can't really hate though because this is like level 20, maybe level 25. I don't know exactly level. If you get the taunt off, but there's just nothing to do. Like there's no kill pressure here. Like obviously he panics and ignites me, so it's a win. But it's just weird for me. Like I don't even know how I still hit 6 first. I think it's because this roam here. It's like because he spent so much time in my lane, Mass G can just come and fuck him up. You can just come and fuck him up. There's not really much I can do. Actually, I should have went.
With some studies attached to them.
I should have went. I didn't see how in trouble Rammus was. And then here I R, and then I shouldn't have started with R, I don't think. I think I should have started with Q. Like if I start with Q, the R execute, and then my E, I thought I had E2, and then I fucking flash. It was just a tragedy in every sense of the word.
If somebody disagrees with me outright on this and can send to me
what's the proper play here?
Peer-reviewed paper published in a quality journal about light delivery.
So here's good. I get the passive. I come back. I have no vision of the thing, and I don't have a ward yet.
I'm more than happy to take a look at that and change my words and stance on this, and publicly, of course. But until then,
so there's the ward. I placed down, and I'm like, okay, he's coming for me. He's got Master Chief's help. I should Q here, but instead I R. So it's like I help him close the gap on me, and there's nothing I can do because my E's on cooldown. So it's just really tragic. I have to use my R to disengage instead of execute, and then I just E randomly and die.
Be mindful. I mean, I'm not trying to.
And then I flash after he Qs. So game's over at that point.
Be mindful of this difference between modulation and mediation. And mediating a process through a hardwired or long-standing biological mechanism is really where you're going to see the powerful effects over time. I also, as you've probably noticed, I really tend to favor behavioral tools and zero-cost tools first, and getting those dialed in before you start, plugging in and swallowing and putting things in various places. Just to really figure out how your biology works and explore that, unless there's, of course, a clinical need to take a prescribed drug, in which case, by all means, listen to your doctor. Okay, a huge number of people asked me about, what about light through windows? And I actually did an Instagram post about this. Look, setting your circadian clock with sunlight coming through a window is going to take 50 to 100 times longer. If you want the data on that, I'd be happy to send you to the various papers that were described in the previous podcast that Jamie Zeitzer from Stanford and I discussed also elsewhere. But here's really the key thing with this.
You need that raw sunlight, bro. Download the free app, raw sunlight going into your eyes.
Have a bright day outside or some sunlight. Hold up that app, take a picture. It'll tell you how many lux. Now you know what lux are. It will tell you how many lux are in that environment. I need to get this out, though. Now close the window. And if you want, close the screen or don't open the screen. You can do all sorts of experiments. And you'll see that it will at least half the amount of lux. And it doesn't scale linearly, meaning let's say I get 10,000 lux outside, 5,000 looking out through an open window, and then I close the window and it's 2,500 lux. It does not mean that you just need to view that sunlight for twice as long if it's half as many lux, okay? It's not like 2,500 lux means you need to look for 10 minutes and 5,000 lux means you look for 5 minutes. It doesn't scale that way just because the biology doesn't work that way. Best thing to do is to get outside if you can. If you can't, next best thing to do is to keep that window open. It is perfectly fine to wear prescription lenses and contacts. Why is it okay to wear prescription lenses and contacts when those are glass also, but looking through a window diminishes the effect? Well, we should think about this. The lenses that you wear in front of your eyes by prescription or on your eyes are designed to focus the light onto your neural retina. In fact, that's what nearsightedness is when the image, because your lens doesn't work quite right, the image falls in front of the neural retina. Wearing a particular lens in front of that focuses the lens onto your retina, onto these very neurons, so they can communicate that to the brain. Costello's loving this. He's deep in sleep thin. Maybe we could play him some tones and he'll remember it later based on the studies we're going to talk about in a little bit. I don't know how we'd know if he remembered it or not, but prescription lenses are fine. In fact, they're great for this reason. They're actually focusing the light onto the retina. So think about this logically, and all of a sudden it makes perfect sense. Your glass window or your windshield or the side window of your car, it isn't optically perfect to bring the image and the light onto your retina. In fact, what it's doing is it's scattering and filtering light, in particular the wavelengths of light that you want. So if you live in a low light environment, lots of questions about this. We talked about this in the previous podcast, but just get outside for longer. Or use really bright lights inside. Okay, so let's think about why I'm making some of these recommendations, because I think it can really empower you with the ability to change your behavior in terms of light viewing and other things, depending on time of year, depending on other lifestyle factors. The important point to understand is that early in the day, your central circadian clocks and all these mechanisms are looking for a lot of light. I mean, they don't have a mind of their own, but it needs a lot of light to trigger this daytime signal, alertness, etc. And early in the day, but not in the middle of the day, you can sum or add photons. So there's this brief period of time early in the day when the sun is low in the sky, when your brain and body are expecting a morning wake-up signal, where let's say it's not that bright outside. Someone sent me a picture or a little movie of their walk in England, and it was pretty overcast, and they were using light meter, and they said it's only about 700 lux or maybe even less. And I said, well, stay outside longer, but when you get inside, turn on the lights really bright, and overhead lights in particular, because those will be best for stimulating these mechanisms. And that's because, at least for the first few hours of the day, you can continue to sum or add photon activation of these cells in the eye and the brain. In the middle of the day, once the sun is overhead, or even if you stay inside all morning, and then you're in the circadian dead zone, which sounds terrible, and it is terrible because doesn't matter if you get a ton of artificial light or even sunlight, you're not going to shift your circadian clock. You're not going to get that wake-up signal. And then in the evening, you want to think about this whole system as being vulnerable to even a few photons of light, because your sensitivity to light really goes up at night. And I talked last time about how you can protect against that sensitivity by looking at the setting sun and watching the evening sun, even if it's not crossing the horizon, around the time of sunset. And that's because it adjusts your retinal sensitivity and your melatonin pathways so that light is not as detrimental to melatonin at night. Think about the afternoon sunlight viewing as kind of I think of it as kind of a Netflix inoculation. It allows me to watch a little bit of Netflix in the evening, although it's very hard to watch a little bit of anything on Netflix. It seems like there's some other neurobiological process that's going on there where I have to watch episode after episode or after episode. But in any case,
True.
You can protect yourself against some of that bad effect of light at night by looking at light in the evening. It really does adjust down the sensitivity of the system.
Okay. I want
to talk about seasonal changes in all these things as they relate to mood and metabolism.
He's gonna
so
cue me.
Depending on where you are in the world, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, at the equator,
and he's
closer
gonna
to the
W me. I
poles,
can't dodge
the days
that.
and nights are
going
different lengths.
So it's clearly unlikely I'm gonna be able to kill him.
That just makes sense.
So I think
but that translates to real biological signals that impact everything from wakefulness and sleep times, but also mood and metabolism. So here's how this works. Now, after seeing the previous episode of the podcast,
no, it's only 125 ping, Jake.
You are armed with the knowledge to really understand how it is that,
bro.
Believe it or not, every cell in your body is tuned to the movement of the planet relative to the sun. So as all of you know, the Earth spins once every 24 hours on its axis.
Can I eat?
So part of that day we're bathed in sunlight.
Oh my god, I got Mastery 5, baby.
The Earth also travels around the sun.
Shit, man.
365 days is the time that it takes 1 year to travel around that sun.
Hey, Kali's got some moves, you know.
The Earth is tilted. It's not perfectly upright. So the Earth is tilted on its axis.
Can I eat?
So depending on where we are in that 365-day journey, and depending on where we are in terms of hemisphere, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, some days of the year are longer than others.
Really letting me trade you like
Some are very
that.
short, some are very long.
These minions need to
At
fuck
the
off,
equator, you experience less variation in day length and therefore night length. And if you're closer to the poles, you're going to experience some very long days, and you're also going to experience some very short days, depending on which pole you're at.
Should be fine. This should be fine.
The simple way to put this is, depending on time of year, the days are either getting shorter or getting longer. Now, every cell in your body adjusts its biology according to day length, except your brain, body, and cells don't actually know anything about day length. It only knows night length. And here's how it works. Light inhibits melatonin powerfully. If days are long and getting longer, that means melatonin is reduced. The total amount of melatonin is
he went
less
Dornton too, so he's got to drink these potions.
I
should be able to zone him off the wave. If he steps up, I can pretty much guarantee that.
Shorter,
he missed
light
the
can't inhibit melatonin as much.
You're gonna go for
summing of photon mechanisms that we talked about before.
It's a bit awkward of me to stand in the minion wave because it means Silas can get a push off.
So every cell in your body
simultaneously
actually
hit me,
external
which is
not
good, of course. But
year
what are you doing,
by
bro?
way of the duration of the melatonin signal. And in general, it's fair to say that in diurnal animals, meaning animals like us that tend to be awake during the daytime, and not nocturnal animals that tend to be awake at night, the longer the melatonin signal, the more depressed, not necessarily
should I eat as well?
depressed.
I could have killed him, I think, if I just eat as well as Q.
Tend to be.
Reproduction,
metabolism, mood,
turnover
turnover rates of skin cells and hair cells all tend to be diminished compared to the spring and summer months for some, or the time in which days are very long and there's less melatonin that tends to, in almost all animals, including humans, more breeding, more hormone elevation of the hormones that stimulate breeding, reproduction, and fertility.
Yeah, I think
metabolism is up. Lipid metabolism, fat burning is up, protein synthesis is up. These things tend to correlate with the seasons. Now, some people are very, very strongly tied to the seasons. They get depressed, clinically depressed in winter. And light therapies are very useful for those people. Some people love the winter and they're happiest in winter and they feel kind of depressed in summer, although that is far more rare. That doesn't mean depression cannot exist in the summer, but when we're talking about seasonal depression, that tends to be true. More depression in the winter. Now, there's other things that correlate with seasonality. Suicide rates tend to be highest in the spring, not in the winter. But that has to do with some of the more complicated and unfortunately tragic aspects of suicide, which is that oftentimes people will commit suicide not at the very depths of their energy levels, but as they're emerging from those depths of low energy. So we'll talk about suicidality and mood disorders in a later podcast season, meaning a month later. But
it's like you're low energy for ages,
for now,
and then you finally get a burst of energy, and then you kill yourself because you got energy to kill yourself. It's really sad.
Now, this might lead you to say, well, I should just really get as much light as I can all the time and reduce melatonin and feel great all the time. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way because melatonin also has important effects on the immune system. It has important effects on transmitter systems in the brain.
It will eventually push.
So everybody needs to figure out for themselves how much light they need early in the day and how much light they need to avoid late in the day in order to optimize their mood and metabolism. There is no one-size-fits-all prescription because there is a range of melatonin receptors. There are a range of everything from metabolic types to genetic histories, family histories, etc. There is no one-size-fits-all prescription. But by understanding that light and extended day length inhibit melatonin, and melatonin tends to be associated with a more depressed or reduced functioning of these kind of activity, driving, and mood-elevating signals, and understanding that you have some control over melatonin by way of light.
Oh, bro. Is he gonna arm
that should empower
there?
You, I believe, to make the adjustments that if you're feeling low, you might ask, how much light am I getting? When am I getting that light? Because sleep is also important for restoring mood, right? So you need sleep. You can't just crush melatonin across the board and expect to feel good because then you're not going to fall asleep and stay asleep. Melatonin, not incidentally, comes from, is synthesized from serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is associated with feelings of well-being. The well-being of a particular kind. Well-being associated with quiescence.
How does he do so much damage, man?
We have enough resources in our immediate condition. It's the kind of thing that comes from a good meal, or sitting down with friends, or holding a loved one, or conversing with somebody that you really bond with. Serotonin does not stimulate action. It tends to stimulate stillness. Very different than the neuromodulator dopamine, which is a reward, feel-good neuromodulator that stimulates action. And actually, dopamine is the precursor to epinephrine, to adrenaline, which actually puts us into action. It's actually made from dopamine, right? So you can start to think about light as a signal that is very powerful for modulating things like sleep and wakefulness, but also serotonin levels, melatonin levels. And I talked about this previously, but I'll mention once more that light in the middle of the night reduces dopamine levels to the point where it can start causing problems with learning and memory and mood. That's one powerful reason to avoid bright light in the middle of the night. Okay. Seasonal rhythms have a number of effects, but humans are not purely seasonal breeders. Unlike a lot of animals, we breed all year long. In fact, there's a
constant breeding
of September babies in my life. Not actual babies, but people that are born in September, which means that they were conceived in December. Without knowing the details, we can fairly assume that. And December, at least in the northern hemisphere, days tend to be shorter, and
just get boots, I guess.
So clearly humans aren't seasonal breeders, but there are shifts in breeding and fertility that exist in humans, but also much more strongly. So seasonal effects vary. Some of you will experience very strong seasonal effects, others of you will not. I think everybody should be taking care to get adequate sunlight and to avoid bright light at night throughout the year, if possible. Throughout this podcast and in previous episodes, I've been mentioning neuromodulators, things like serotonin, dopamine, which tend to bias certain brain circuits and things in our body to happen, and certain brain circuits and things in our body not. One of the ones I've mentioned numerous times is epinephrine, which is a neuromodulator that tends to put us into action, to make us want to move. In fact, when it's released in
oh my god!
Body, it's all stress, feeling of being stressed. Several people ask me, what's the difference between epinephrine and adrenaline? Adrenaline is...
I'm bad! What the fuck, man? No E on the echo, what did I die to?
Same molecule, except that it's released...
Do I have MR?
And so people use
I
these
52
phrases
MR.
What? Rather interchangeably.
W passive E,
Epi
like he hit... Oh, he
near,
ignited me.
Or on top of, sometimes. And anytime you see nephron...
I saw Echo had no stun, had no shield, had no ult, and Silas had nothing, so I don't know, man. I feel like I should have won that, but
they just
burst the shit on me.
To stimulate agitation and the desire to move.
So I'm just gonna get this.
That's what that's about.
Yeah,
which brings us to the topic.
That's super bad of me, though.
A lot of questions about exercise. What forms of exercise are best for sleeping well? When should I exercise, etc.? There's a lot of individual variability around this, but I can talk about what I know from the science literature and what I happen to do myself. There are basically two forms of exercise that we can talk about, although, of course, I realize there are many different forms of exercise. There's much more nuance to this. But we can talk about cardiovascular exercise, where the idea is to repeat a movement over and over and over continuously. So that'd be like running, biking, rowing, cycling, this kind of thing. Or there's resistance exercise, where you're moving, lifting, because you're putting down also, things of progressively heavier and heavier weight that you couldn't do continuously for
No, just kill it, man. So, just kill his ass, man. What the fuck?
Cardiovascular exercise is typically aerobic type exercise and resistance exercise or anaerobic type exercise, and yes, there's variation between the two. Most studies of exercise have looked at aerobic exercise because that's basically
there. He's just gonna clear it, right?
Get a
no,
rat
didn't
or a
notice.
mouse to do.
Didn't even notice.
What's really weird about rats and mice, they like to run on wheels so much that someone actually did this study, it was published in Science. They put a wheel, a running wheel, in the middle of a field, and mice ran to that wheel and ran on the wheel. Turns out that what they like is the passage of the visual image of the
He only has last chapter.
Which I
That's
find
what, 40 AP?
Kind of
and I have, okay.
remarkable.
I did not
doubling
know
because it
that.
seems so like trivial.
They
but
just
anyway,
gives you
they
half
love
the
aerobic
APS
exercise, and
thing.
so most of the studies were done.
Oh, he uses 2-level lead on me. Fuck, I'm bad.
So far, it's been challenging to find conditions in which mice will weights, or will do it in a laboratory. So any weight-bearing exercise studies really have to be done in humans, and since humans are what we're interested in, there are some studies looking at these two things and when they tend to work best. Now, you will see some places aerobic exercise is best done in the morning and weight training is best done in the afternoon. I think there's far more individual variation than that. I think there are, however, a couple windows that the exercise science literature and the circadian literature points to as windows related to body temperature in which performance, injury, in which performance is optimized, injury is reduced, and so on. And those tend to be 30 minutes after waking, and that probably correlates with the inflection in cortisol associated with waking, whether or not you get light or not. 3 hours after waking, which probably correlates to the rise in body temperature, sometime right around waking, and the later afternoon, usually 11 hours after waking, which is when temperature tends to peak. So some people like to exercise in the morning, some people like to exercise in the afternoon. It really depends. I think for those of us with very busy schedules, it's advantageous to be able to do your training whenever you have the opportunity to do it, unless you can really control your schedule. And so I would never want recommendations to seem like recommendations. What I'm really describing is an opportunity 30 minutes after waking, 3 hours after waking, or 11 hours after waking has been shown, at least in some studies, to optimize performance, reduce injury, and that sort of thing. You really have to figure out what works for you. A note about working out first thing in the morning. Last time we talked about non-photic phase shifts. If you exercise first thing in the morning, your body will start to develop an anticipatory circuit. There's actually plasticity in these circadian circuits that will lead you to want to wake up at the particular time that you exercised the previous 3 or 4 days. So that can be a powerful tool. But you still want to get light exposure, because it turns out that light and exercise converge to give an even bigger wake-up signal to the brain and body. So you might want to think about that. Some people find if they exercise late in the day, they have trouble sleeping. In general, intense exercise does that, whereas the kind of lower intensity exercise doesn't. I found some interesting literature that talked about sleep need and exercise. I found this fascinating, that if one is waking, not feeling rested and recovered and yet sleeping the same amount that they typically have, it's quite possible that the intensity of exercise in the preceding 2 or 3 days is too high. Whereas if one can't recover no matter how much sleep they get, they're sleepy all the time, correlated, that the volume...
Put him to sleep, man!
Now, I'm not an exercise scientist. We should probably get Andy Galpin or somebody else on here who's really an expert in this kind of stuff. I do realize as soon as anyone talks about exercise or nutrition publicly, they're basically opening themselves up to all sorts of challenges, because you can basically find support for almost any protocol in the literature. What I've looked at was 2 journals in particular, International Journal of Chronobiology and Journal Biological Rhythms, to assess these parameters that I mentioned just a moment ago, because the studies tended to be done in humans. They were fairly recent, and they came from groups that I recognized, as well as knowing that those journals are peer-reviewed. Many of your questions were about neural plasticity, which is the brain change in response to experience. There was a question that asked whether or not these really deep biological mechanisms around wakefulness, time of waking, sleep, etc., were subject to neural plasticity, and indeed they are. Some of that plasticity is short-term, and some of it is more long-term. There's a really good analogy here, which is if you happen to eat on a very tight schedule where every day, so 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Let's say you were to do that for a couple days. After a few days, you would start to anticipate those meal times where no matter where you were in the world, no matter what was going on in your life, about 5 to 10 minutes before those meal times, you would start to feel hungry and even a little agitated, which is your body's way of trying to get you to forage for food. And that's because of some peptide signals that come from the periphery, from your body, things like hypocretin-orexin that signal to the hypothalamus and brainstem to make you active and alert to food and feel hungry. So there's kind of an anticipatory circuit that's a chemical circuit, but eventually over time, the neurons, the neural circuits that control hypocretin-orexin would get tuned to the neural circuits that are involved in eating and maybe even smell and taste to create a kind of eating circuit that's unique to your pattern, to your rhythm. The same thing is true for these waking and exercise and other schedules, including ultradian schedules. If you wake up in the morning and start getting your sunlight, you start exercising in the morning, or you exercise in the afternoon, pretty soon your body will start to anticipate that and start to secrete hormones and other signals that prepare your body for the ensuing activity of waking up or going to sleep. So if you get onto a pattern or a rhythm, even if that rhythm isn't down to the minute, you'll find that there's plasticity in these circuits and it becomes easier to wake up early if that's your thing, or exercise at a particular day if that's your thing. That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. A number of people asked, what can I do to increase plasticity? And that really comes in two forms. There's plasticity that we can access in sleep to improve rates of learning and depth of learning from the previous day or so. And there's this NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, that can be done without sleeping to improve rates of learning and depth of retention, etc. So let's consider those both, and you can incorporate these protocols if you like. Again, these are based on quality peer-reviewed studies. First, let's talk about learning in sleep. This is based on some work that I'll provide the reference for that was published in the journal Science. Excellent journal. Matt Walker also talks about some of these studies done by others in his book, Why We Sleep. The studies, just to remind you, are structured the following way. An individual is brought into a laboratory, does a spatial memory task. So there tends to be a screen with a bunch of different objects popping up on the screen in different locations. So it might be a bulldog's face, then it might be a cat, then it might be an apple, then it might be a pen in different locations. And that sounds trivially easy, but with time you can imagine it gets pretty tough to come back a day later and remember if something presented in a given location was something you've seen before, and whether or not it was presented in that location or a different location. If you add enough objects and change the locations enough, this can actually be quite difficult. In this study, the subjects either just went through the experiment, or a particular odor was released into the room while they were learning, or a tone was played in the room while they were learning, and then during the sleep of those subjects the following night and the following night, this was done repeatedly for several nights, the same odor or tone was played while the subjects were sleeping. They did this in different stages of sleep: non-REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep. They did this with just the tone in sleep. If the subjects had the odor, if they had the odor while learning. So basically all the controls, all the things you would want to see done to make sure that it wasn't some indirect effect, some modulatory effect. Right? And what they found was that providing the same stimulus, the odor if they smelled an odor, or a tone if the subjects heard a tone while learning, if they just delivered that odor or tone while the subject slept, rates of learning and retention of information significantly. This is pretty cool. What this means is that you can cue the subconscious brain, the asleep brain, to learn particular things better and faster. So how might you implement this? Well, you could play with this if you want. I don't see any real challenge to this, provided the odor is a safe one and it doesn't wake you up, and the tone is a safe one and doesn't wake you up. You could do this by having a metronome, for instance, while learning something, playing in the background, or particular music, and then have that very faintly while you sleep. So you could apply this if you like and try this. There are a number of groups, I think now, that are trying this using tactile stimulation. So slight vibration on the wrist during learning, and then the same vibration on the wrist during sleep. It does not appear that the sensory modality, whether or not it's odor or auditory tone or tactile stimulation, somatosensory stimulation, whether or not it matters. It's remarkable because it really shows that sleep is an extension of the waking state. We've known that for a long time, but this really tethers those two in a very meaningful and actionable way. So I think I'll report back to you as I learn more about these studies, but that's what I know about them at this point. As long as we're there, we might as well talk about dreaming, because I got so many questions about dreams. A couple of people want to ask me what their dreams meant. Look, I don't even know what my dreams mean half the time. I occasionally will wake up from a dream and remember it. If you want to remember your dreams better, if you're somebody who has challenges remembering your dreams, you can set your alarm so that you wake up in the middle of one of these 90-minute cycles, which toward morning tend to be occupied almost exclusively by REM sleep. Remember, early in the night, you have less REM sleep than later in the night. But you want to get as much sleep as you can, because that's healthy. So I don't know that you want to wake yourself up. Some people find that writing down their thoughts immediately first thing in the morning allows them to later spontaneously remember the dream they had. There's some literature on that. The meaning of dreams is a little bit controversial. Some people believe they have strong meaning. Other people believe that they can be just spontaneous firing of neurons that were active in the waking state and don't have any meaning. There are good data to show that when you learn new spatial environments, that there's a replay of those environments, so-called place cells that fire in your brain only when you enter a particular environment. But those are replayed in sleep in almost direct fashion to the way that things were activated when you were learning. Dreams are fascinating. They're we're paralyzed during dreams, which brings us to another question. Somebody asked about sleep paralysis. We are paralyzed for much of our sleep, so-called atonia. So presumably, so we don't act out our dreams. Some people wake up and they're still paralyzed. I've actually had this happen to me, not very many times, but a few times, and then they jolt themselves awake. And it actually is quite terrifying, I can say from personal experience, to wake up, be wide awake, and you cannot move your body at all. It's really quite frightening. There are a couple things that will increase the intrusion of atonia into the wakeful state, which is
it's got to be Sonya's, right? Sonya's is way too busted.
You can't move. One is marijuana, THC. I'm not a marijuana smoker. I'm not a cop, or I don't know the legality where you live, so I'm not saying one thing or another about marijuana. I'm just the fact that I had that experience without marijuana means that it can happen regardless. But marijuana smokers, for whatever reason, maybe it has something to do with the cannabinoid receptors or the serotonin receptors downstream of the motor pathways. I don't know. I couldn't find any literature on this. But marijuana smokers report higher frequency of this kind of paralysis and wakefulness as you transition from sleep to wakefulness. I suppose probably one could learn to get comfortable with it. For me, it was terrifying because I'm just used to being able to move my limbs, fortunately, and I wasn't able to. And it's quite a thing, let me tell you. Okay, some other questions about neuroplasticity. So the other form of neuroplasticity is not the neuroplasticity that you're amplifying by listening to tones or smelling odors in sleep, but the neuroplasticity that you can access with non-sleep deep rest. So NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, as well as short 20-minute naps, which are very close to non-sleep deep rest because people rarely drop into deep states of sleep during short naps unless they're very sleep deprived.
Nice.
NSDR has been shown to increase rates of learning when done for 20-minute bouts for to match an approximately 90-minute
man.
What am I talking
Can't
about?
move. Oh, my arm was a...
Cycles are these ultradian cycles that I talked about previously.
Good for
and we tend to learn very well by taking a 90-minute cycle,
good.
transitioning into some focus mode early in the cycle when it's hard to focus, and then deep focus and learning feels almost like agitation and strain, and then by the end of that 90-minute cycle, it becomes very hard to maintain focus and learn more information. There's a study published in Cell Reports last year, great journal, excellent paper, showing that 20-minute naps or light sleep of a sort of non-sleep deep rest taken immediately after, or close to, it doesn't have to be immediately after you finish the last sentence of learning or whatever it is, or bar of music, but a couple minutes after, transitioning to a period of non-sleep deep rest where you're turning off the analysis of duration, path, and outcome has been shown to accelerate learning to a significant degree, both the amount of information and the retention of that information. So that's pretty cool, because this is a cost-free, drug-free way of accelerating learning without having to get more sleep, but simply by introducing these 20-minute bouts. I would encourage people, if they want to try this, to consider the 20 minutes per every 90 minutes of ultradian learning cycle.
Are you fucking serious?
We're incorporating a number of different neuroscience-backed tools, 90-minute cycles for focused learning, for the motor, for the cognitive, for the musical, whatever, and then transition to a 20-minute non-sleep deep rest protocol. I just want to cue you the fact that in the last episode, in the caption on YouTube, we provided links to 2 different Yoga Nidra non-sleep deep rest protocols as well as hypnosis protocols that are clinically backed.
How is he still alive, man?
Stanford Psychiatry
Wait,
Department.
what?
All those resources are free. There are also a lot of other hypnosis scripts out there. I like the ones from Michael Sealey, S-E-A-L. I think it's E-Y, although maybe it's just L-Y. You can find them easily on YouTube. Clinical hypnosis scripts, meaning not stage hypnosis. They're not designed to get you to do anything. In fact, they're just designed to help rewire your brain circuitry. Now, how does hypnosis work that way? This has a lot to do with sleep because it engages neuroplasticity by bringing together 2 things that normally are separate from one another. One is the alert, focused, wakeful state where you activate the learning. And then there's the deep rest where the actual reconfiguration of the neurons and synapses takes place. Hypnosis brings both the focus and the deep rest component into the same compartment of time. It's a very unique state in that way. So hypnosis kind of maximizes the learning bout and the non-sleep deep rest bout and combines them. But of course, that requires some guidance from a script or from a hypnotist, clinically trained hypnotist, and it becomes hard to acquire detailed information. It's more about shifts in state, like fear to states of calm, or smoking to quitting smoking, anxiety around a trauma to release of anxiety around a trauma, rather than specific information learned in hypnosis. Okay? So hypnosis seems more about modulating the circuits that underlie state as opposed to specific information. Although I would not be surprised if there weren't certain forms of hypnosis that could increase retention and memory. Brings us to the next thing about learning and plasticity, which is nootropics, aka smart drugs. This is a big topic. That sigh was a sigh of concern about how to address nootropics in a thorough enough but thoughtful enough way. Look, I have a lot of thoughts about nootropics. First of all, it means smart drugs, I believe, and I don't like that phrase because let's just take a step back and think about exercise. You say, I want to be more physically fit. What does that mean? I would ask for more specificity. I'd say, do you want to be stronger? Okay, maybe you need to lift heavier objects progressively. Do you want more endurance? Very different protocol to access endurance. Do you want flexibility? Do you want explosiveness or suppleness? Huge range of things that we call physical fitness. Maybe you want all of them. If we were talking about emotional fitness, we would say, well, an ability to feel empathy, but probably also to disengage from empathy because you don't want to be tethered to other people's emotions all the time. That's not healthy either. You would think about being able to access a range of emotions, but for some people, their range into the sadness regime is really quite vast, but their range into the happiness regime might be kind of limited. For other people who are in a manic state, it might be they can access all the happy stuff, but not the sadder stuff. So I'm speaking by way of analogy here, but if we say, we're talking about cognitive and, cognitive abilities, we have to ask, okay, creativity, memory. We tend to associate intelligence with memory. I think this goes back to like spelling bees or something, the ability to retain a lot of information and just regurgitate information, which will get you some distance in some disciplines of life, but it won't allow you creative thinking. It's necessary for creative thinking. You need a knowledge base, right? You can't just look up everything on Google, despite what certain educators or so-called educators say. You need a database so that you have the raw materials with which to be creative. So necessary to have memory, but not sufficient to be creative, right? The creative could have a poor memory for certain things, but certainly not for everything. They can't have anterograde and retrograde amnesia. They'd be like the goldfish that every time around the tank, it can't remember where it's at. I actually don't know that they've ever done that experiment. But, so no disrespect to goldfish, but So you get the idea. You've got creativity. You have memory. You have the ability to task switch, right? You have the ability to strategy develop and strategy implement. So the problem I have with the concept of a nootropic or a smart drug is it's not specific as to what cognitive algorithm you're trying to engage. We need more specificity. That said, there are elements to learning that we've discussed here before that are very concrete. Things like the ability to focus and put the blinders on to everything else that's happening around you and in your head, mainly, right? Distractions about things you should be doing, could be doing, or might be doing, and focus on what you need to do. And then that's required for triggering the acetylcholine neuromodulator that will then allow you to highlight particular synapses that will then later change in sleep. So no nootropic allows you to bypass the need for sleep and deep rest. That's important to understand. So I daydream about a day when people will be able to access compounds that are safe, that will allow them to learn better, meaning to access information, focus better, as well as to sleep better and activate the plasticity from the learning bout. Right now, most nootropics tend to bundle a bunch of things together. Most of them include some form of stimulant, caffeine. Episode 2, I'll tell you more probably than you ever want to know about caffeine, adenosine, and how that works. So refer there for how caffeine works. But stimulants will allow you to increase focus up to a particular point. If you have too little alertness in your system, you can't focus. Too much, however, you start to cliff and focus drifts. Okay, so you can't just ingest more stimulant to be more focused. It doesn't work that way. Most nootropics also include things that increase or are designed to increase acetylcholine, things like alpha-GPC and other things of that sort. And indeed, there's some evidence that they can increase acetylcholine. I refer you again to examine.com, the website, to evaluate any supplements or compounds for their safety and their effects in humans and animals. Free website, as well as with links to studies. So we need the focus component. We need the alertness component. The alertness component comes from epinephrine, traditionally from caffeine stimulation. The acetylcholine stimulation traditionally comes from choline donors or alpha-GPC, things of that sort. And then you would want to have some sort of off switch, because anything that's going to really stimulate your alertness that then provides a crash, that crash is not a crash into the deep kind of restful slumber that you would want for learning. It's a crash. Let's just call it lopsided sleep. It's deep sleep, but it lacks certain spindles and other elements of physiology, sleep spindles, that really engage the learning process and the reconfiguration of synapses. So right now, my stance on nootropics is that maybe for occasional use, provided it's safe for you, I'm not recommending it, but in general, it tends to use more of a shotgun approach than is probably useful for learning and in the long run. A lot of people ask about modafinil or armodafinil, which was designed for treatment of narcolepsy, so right there it tells you it's a stimulant. And yes, there is evidence it will improve learning and memory. Modafinil is very expensive last time I checked. Armodafinil, I think, is the recent released generic version of this that's far less expensive. Most of these things look a lot like amphetamine, and many of them have the potential for addiction or habit forming. But more importantly, a lot of those things also can create metabolic effects by disruption to insulin receptors and so forth. So you want to approach those with a strong sense of caution. Now, there are the milder things that act as nootropics. I mentioned some of them, like alpha-GPC. Some people like ginkgo. Ginkgo gives me vicious headaches, so I don't take it. So, people really differ. Last podcast, I recommended magnesium threonate if you were exploring supplements. I'm not recommending anything directly. I'm just saying if you're exploring supplements, magnesium threonate seems among the magnesiums to be one of the more bioavailable and useful for sleep. I recommended it actually to a good friend of mine. It gave him at very low dose, he had stomach issues with it. He just had to simply stop taking it. So there's variability there. It gave him some stomach cramping and just didn't feel good on it. Stopped it, he felt better. Other people take magnesium threonate and feel great. I was asked, do magnesium need to be taken with or without food, daytime or before sleep? If you're going to go that route, it should be taken 30 to 60 minutes before sleep because it's designed to make you sleepy. And I'm not aware that it has to be taken with food, but again, all of this has to be run by your doctor, and this is your healthcare to govern. Not these are not strict recommendations, so look into it. But magnesium threonate, most people I've recommended it to have benefited from it tremendously. Some people can't tolerate it, so you have to find out. There were a number of questions about other supplements designed to access deep sleep, in part to access neuroplasticity, but now I'm just sort of transitioning from neuroplasticity to these compounds that can regulate sleep. One of them that I discussed at the end of the last podcast, I got a lot of questions about, is apigenin, Apigenin. Apigenin, if you look in the literature, the way it works is it increases some of the enzymes associated with GABA metabolism. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the neurotransmitter that is increased after a couple drinks containing alcohol, and that shut down the forebrain. Apigenin is a derivative of the chamomile. I think the proper pronunciation of this is Matricaria chamomilla, although I always feel like I should be using a Spanish accent whenever I say something like that. Other related things that impact the GABA system and increase GABA are things like passion flower, which is Passiflora incurata. I don't know why the Italian, is that Italian? Anyway, my Italian colleagues, please forgive me. I have some very close Italian friends and colleagues in Genoa. I butchered the Italian, sorry. In any event, apigenin and passion flower found in a lot of supplements designed to increase sleepiness and sleep and they work presumably because they increase GABA. Actually, they work on chloride channels. Rather than give you a whole lecture on membrane biophysics and neurons, I'll just say that when neurons are really active, it's because sodium ions, salt, rushes into the cells and causes them to fire electrically. The cells tend to become less active as more chloride, which is a negatively charged ion. This is probably taking some of you back to either the wonderful times or traumas of high school physics. The chloride is negatively charged, so it tends to make cells less electrically positive because it carries a negative charge, and hyperpolarizes the neuron. So apigenin works through increasing the activity of these chloride channels. Passion flower works by increasing the activity of these chloride channels, and GABA transmission. It tends to increase this inhibitory neurotransmitter that shuts off our thinking, our analysis of duration, path, and outcome. So if you're going to explore these things, I suggest you at least know how they work. You at least go to examine.com, that you talk to your doctor about them. Some people asked about serotonin for getting to sleep and staying asleep. Now, I understand the rationale here. Just like I understand the rationale of taking something like mecunapurines or L-Dopa to increase dopamine. But sometimes what works on paper doesn't really work in the real world. I personally have tried taking a supplement which was L-tryptophan, which is the precursor to serotonin, or 5-HTP, which is designed to increase, it is serotonin basically. You're just one biochemical step away from taking actual serotonin. And I'll be honest, the sleep that I had with increased serotonin by way of tryptophan or 5-HTP was dreadful. I fell asleep almost immediately. You say, well, that's great. And 90 minutes later, I woke up and I couldn't sleep almost for 48 hours. Now, that was me. I have a pretty sensitive system to certain things and not to other things. Some people love these things. So you really have to be thoughtful and explore them with that kind of awareness of being thoughtful and realizing that what works for you might not work for everybody, and what works for everybody might not work for you. Okay, I'd like to continue by talking about the role of temperature in sleep, accessing sleep, staying asleep, and wakefulness. But first I want to tell a joke, because I think this joke really captures some of the critical things to understand about any self-experimentation that you might do. So this is a story that was told to me by a colleague of mine who's now a professor of Caltech, not to be named. So there's a scientist, and they're in their lab, and they're trying to understand how the nervous system works. So they go over to a tank and they pick up a frog. They take the frog and they put it down on the table, and they clap. And the frog jumps. Think for a while. They pick up the frog. They go, okay. They go over to the cabinet, and they take out a little bit of a paralytic drug, and they inject it locally into the back leg. Set it down and clap. And the frog jumps. But it kind of like jumps to the side a little bit. Pick it up. They inject the paralytic into the other back leg. They clap again. The frog jumps, but it really doesn't jump well that time. It kind of drags itself forward. So they pick it up and they inject the paralytic into the remaining 2 legs. They set it down and they clap. And the frog doesn't jump. Oh my goodness. The legs are used for hearing. Now, they publish the paper. The paper comes out in a great journal, news releases. It's a really big deal. Their career takes off. 20 years later, a really smart graduate student comes along and says, yeah, but that's loss of function. Doesn't really show gain of function. So let's take a closer look. So they repeat the first experiment, and it checks out. Everything happens the same way. But then they take the frog, and they inject a drug into all 4 legs that turns off the paralytic. Right? It's an antagonist. They set the frog down, they clap, and the frog jumps. Oh my goodness. It's true. The legs really are for hearing. Now, first of all, I want to make the point that this is not to illustrate that science is not a good practice. It is. We need to do loss of function and gain in function experiments. But just to show that correlation and causation is complicated. You need to do a variety of control experiments, and you really need to figure out what works for you. And so while science can provide answers about what works under very controlled conditions, it doesn't and can never address all the situations in which a given compound, a given practice will or won't work. And it's not just individual variability, it's that there are a number of different factors. You all, of course, know that light can activate and shift your circadian rhythm, but so can exercise, so can food. The last point I want to make is an important one, which is that no frogs were hurt in the telling of this joke. Okay, so let's continue. I want to talk about temperature. Temperature is super interesting as it relates to circadian rhythms and wakefulness and sleep. First, let's take a look at what's happening to our body temperature across each 24-hour cycle. In general, our temperature tends to be lowest right around 4 a.m. and starts creeping up around 6 a.m., 8 a.m., and peaks sometime between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. Now, that varies from person to person, but in general, if we were to continuously monitor or occasionally monitor temperature, that's what we would see. Now, what's interesting is that even in the absence of any light cues or meal cues, we would have a shift. We would have an oscillation or a rhythm in our temperature that would go from high to low. This is why the idea that we're all 96.8 and that's our correct temperature, forget that. That is no longer true. It never was true. It depends on what time of day you measure temperature. However, there is a range, which is within normal range. I think most of us associate fever with somewhere around 100, 101, 103. That's concerning. And we would be very concerned if temperature dropped too low as well. The way that the temperature rhythm that's endogenous, that's within us and rhythmic no matter what, the way it gets anchored to the pattern I described before of being lowest at 4 a.m. and increasing again around through the day until about 4 to 6 p.m., is by way of entrainment or matching to some external cue, which is almost always going to be light, but also exercise. Now, you may have experienced this temperature rhythm and how quickly it can become unentrained or it can fall out of entrainment. Here's an experiment I wouldn't want you to do, but you've probably experienced this before, where you wake up, it's sunny outside, and maybe you have some email or some things to take care of, or maybe you didn't sleep that well the night before, and so you stay indoors. You don't change anything about your breakfast. You don't change anything about your within home temperature or anything like that. And somewhere right around 10 or 11 o'clock, you start feeling kind of chilled, like you're cold. Well, what happened was the oscillators, the clocks in your various tissues that are governed by temperature and circadian rhythm are starting to split away from your central clock mechanisms. So it's actually important that your temperature match day length. Now, there's another way in which temperature matches, or daytime, There's also an important way in which temperature matches day length. In general, as days get longer, it tends to be hotter out. Not always, but in general, that's the way it is. And as days get shorter, it tends to be colder outside. So temperature and day length are also linked. Metabolically, they're linked. Biologically, they're linked, and atmospherically, they're linked for the reasons that we talked about before about duration of day length and other climate features and so forth. So one of the most powerful things about setting your circadian rhythm properly is that your temperature will start to fall into a regular rhythm. And that temperature has a very strong effect on things like metabolism and when you will feel most willing and interested in exercising. Typically, the willingness to exercise and engage in any kind of activity, mental or physical, is going to be when that rise in temperature is steepest, when the slope of that line is greatest. That's why 30 minutes after waking is one of those key windows, as well as 3 hours after waking, and then when temperature actually peaks, which is generally about 11 hours after waking. So this is why we say that temperature and circadian rhythm are linked, but they're actually even more linked than that. We've talked before about how light enters the eye, triggers activation of these melanopsin cells, which then triggers activation of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master circadian clock. And then I always say the master circadian clock informs all the cells and tissues of your body and puts them into a nice cohesive rhythm. But what I've never answered was how it actually puts them into that rhythm. And it does it two ways. One is it secretes a peptide. A peptide is just a little protein that floats through the bloodstream and signals to the cells, okay, we're tuning your clock, kind of like a little, watch store owner would tune the clocks. But the other way is it synchronizes the temperature under which those cells exist. So temperature is actually the effector of the circadian rhythm. Now this is really important because changes in temperature by way of exercise, by way of eating, but especially by way of exercise can start to shift our circadian rhythm pretty dramatically. But let's even go to a more extreme example. Nowadays, there's some interest in cold showers and ice baths. Not everybody is doing this, I realize. People seem to either love this or hate this. I don't mind the cold dunk thing. I get regular about this from time to time, and I'll do it. I haven't been doing it recently. It's always painful to do the first couple times, and you get kind of used to it. However, I've taken people to a cold dunk or an ice bath. I have a family member who wouldn't get in literally past her toes. She was like, this is just too aversive for me. Some people really like the cold. People vary tremendously. Getting into an ice bath is very interesting because you have a rebound increase in thermogenesis. Now, you should know from the previous episode that as that temperature increases, it will shift your circadian rhythm. And which direction it shifts your circadian rhythm will depend on whether or not you're doing it during the daytime or late in the day. If you do it after 8 p.m., it's going to make your day longer, right? Because your body and your central clocks are used to temperature going up early in the day and throughout the day and peaking in the afternoon. If you then increase that further, or you simply increase it over its baseline at 8 p.m. after temperature was already falling, even if it's just by half a degree or a couple degrees, or you do that with exercise, doesn't have to be the ice bath, you are extending, you are shifting forward, you are phase delaying your clock, you're convincing your clock and therefore the rest of your body that the day is still going, right? You're giving it the perception, the cellular and physiological perception that the day is getting longer, and you will want to naturally stay up later and wake up later. Now you might say, wait, I do an ice bath late at night and I feel great and I fall deeply asleep. Well, cold can trigger the release of melatonin. There's a rebound increase in melatonin, so that could be the cause of that effect. You have to see what works for you. But if you do the ice bath early in the day and then get out, you will experience a more rapid rise, or cold shower early in the day, a more rapid rise in your body temperature that will phase advance your clock and make it easier to get up early the following day. So for those of you that are having trouble getting up, and this is going to almost sound laughable, but a cold shower first thing in the morning will wake you up. But that's waking you up in the short term because of a different mechanism, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it also is shifting your clock. It's phase advancing your clock in a way that makes you more likely to get up earlier the next day. Okay, so in other words, increasing your temperature by getting in an ice bath, or cold shower, or exercising, which causes a compensatory increase in body temperature, think about the normal pattern of body temperature, low around 4:35 a.m., starts to peak right around waking, starts to increase right around waking, then steep slope to a peak around 4 to 6 p.m. and then drops off. If you introduce an increase in body temperature by way of cold exposure early in the day, let's say 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., if you're, masochistic enough to get into a cold shower at that time, more power to you. It's going to make you want to wake up about half hour to an hour earlier the next day than you normally would. Whereas if you do it while your temperature is falling, it will tend to delay and make your body perceive as if the day is getting longer. These are phase advances and phase delays. We're going to get into this in far more detail when we talk about jet lag and shift work in episode 4, as well as other things. But temperature is, again, it's not just one tool to manipulate wake-up time and circadian rhythm and metabolism. It is the effector. It is the way that the central circadian clock impacts all the cells and tissues of your body. If you want to read further about this and you're really curious about the role of temperature, work by Joe Takahashi, who used to be at Northwestern University and is now at UT Southwestern in Dallas. Incredible scientist, and it really worked out a lot of the mechanisms around temperature and circadian rhythms. You can just Google his name and you'll see a whole bunch of studies there. I want to talk about cold and cold exposure because there's a great misconception about this that actually you can leverage once you understand how to use cold to either increase thermogenesis and fat loss, metabolism, or you can use it for stress mitigation and mood. And it really depends on one simple feature of how you approach the ice bath or cold shower. If you get into an ice bath or cold shower and you are calming yourself, you're actively calming the autonomic nervous system, maybe through some deep breathing, maybe through visualization, maybe you sing a song, people do this stuff. They use various tools. Some people find paying attention to an external stimulus is more helpful, thinking about something, not the experience of the cold. Other people find that directly experiencing the cold in its most intense form and kind of going into the cold, quote unquote, is the best way to approach it. It really varies for people. There's no right or wrong way to go about this. But the goal of using cold exposure for stress inoculation and to raise your stress threshold, to be able to tolerate heightened levels of real-life stress, not the ice bath, but real-life stress like work stress and relational stress, etc., is by suppressing the activation of the so-called sympathetic nervous system, meaning the alertness or stress system. That involves buffering or trying to resist the shiver response. The shiver response is an autonomic response designed to generate heat, presumably, and actually that is what it does, in order to counter the cold. So when you use cold exposure and you're kind of muscling through it or you're learning to relax within it as a form of stress inoculation, that's great and works quite well for that purpose. And there's a reason why cold exposure is used in a variety of forms of military stress inoculation. Most famous of which, of course, is the Navy SEAL floods test, really, which is a screening procedure for becoming a SEAL, involves a lot of exposure to cold water. However, if you're interested in using cold exposure for fat loss and thermogenesis, you want to do the exact opposite thing. There was a paper published in Nature 2 years ago which showed that cold-induced shiver, the actual physical shiver, activates the release of a chemical in the body from muscle called succinate, S-U-C-C-I-N-A-T-E. Succinate travels in the bloodstream and then goes and activates a particular category of fat, not the typical kind of pink or white fat that we think of as like blubber in humans, the stuff that people seem to generally want less of, except for those genetic freaks that seem to have none of it, depending on what they consume. Congratulations. Brown fat is called brown fat because it's actually dark under the microscope. It's rich with mitochondria, and it exists mostly between the scapulae and in the upper neck, and it generates thermogenesis and heat in the body. It's rich with a certain category of adrenergic receptor. Incidentally, epinephrine binds to adrenergic receptors. These brown fat cells increase metabolism. It's called brown fat thermogenesis, and cause fat burning of other kinds of fat, the pink and white fat. So what does this all mean? This means if you want to use the ice bath in order to increase metabolism, shiver away. If you want to use the ice bath or cold shower in order to stress inoculate, resist the shiver and learn to stay calm or quote-unquote muscle through it. Now, I don't know that anyone's ever really talked about this publicly because I think the data are so new, and I think that people assume that the ice bath or cold exposure is just one thing. Here I've talked about it 3 ways to shift your circadian rhythm depending on whether or not you're doing it early in the day while your temperature is still rising or at its peak, or after that peak in order to extend the perception of your day as continuing and make you want to go to sleep later and wake up later. Now, and then the third way, of course, is to either activate brown fat thermogenesis and increase metabolism. I suppose the fourth way would be to increase stress tolerance or stress threshold. Okay? But remember, temperature is the effector of circadian rhythms. Light is the trigger. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is the master circadian clock that mediates all these changes, also influenced by non-photic influence like exercise and feeding and things of that sort. But temperature is the effector. Now, you can also shift your circadian rhythm with eating. When you travel and you land in a new location and your schedule is inverted 12 hours, one way that we know you can shift your rhythm more quickly is to get onto the local meal schedule. Now, that probably has to do with 2 effects. One are changes in temperature, eating-induced increases in body temperature. Now you should understand why that would work. As well as eating has this anticipatory secretion of hypercretin-orexin that I talked about it earlier. So if this is getting a little too down in the weeds, don't worry about it. I will get more into this in episode 4 of how to shift one's rhythm. But I would love for people to understand that light and temperature are the real heavy-duty levers when it comes to moving your circadian rhythm and sleep times and activity schedules. And exercise and feeding can help, but really temperature and light, with light being the primary one, are the most important when it comes to sleep and wakefulness. Many people ask questions about food and neurotransmitters and how those relate to sleep, wakefulness, and mood, which is essentially 25 hours of content for me to cover. But I'm going to try and distill out the most common questions. We've talked a lot about neuromodulators like dopamine, acetylcholine, and norepinephrine. You may notice in those discussions that the precursors to, say, serotonin is tryptophan. Tryptophan actually comes from the diet. It comes from the foods that we eat. Tyrosine is the precursor to dopamine. It comes from the foods that we eat. And then once we ingest them, those compounds are circulated to a variety of different cells and tissues. But it is true that our food and the particular foods we eat can influence things like neuromodulator levels to some extent. It's not the only way, because there are also enzymes and biochemical pathways that are going to regulate how much tyrosine gets converted into dopamine, and there are elements of the dopaminergic neurons, the dopamine neurons themselves, that are electrical that have influence on this as well. But there are a couple fair assumptions that we can make. First of all, nuts and meats, in particular red meats, tend to be rich in things like tyrosine, right? That tells you right there that because tyrosine is the precursor of dopamine and dopamine is the precursor of norepinephrine and epinephrine, that those foods tend to lend themselves toward the production of dopamine and epinephrine and the sorts of things that are associated with wakefulness. Now, of course, the volume of food that we eat also impacts our wakefulness. If we eat a lot of anything, whether or not it's ribeye steaks, rice, or cardboard, please don't eat cardboard, your stomach, if it's very distended, will draw a lot of blood into your gut, and you will divert blood from other tissues, and you'll become sleepy. So it's not just about food content, it's also about food volume. All right? Fasting states generally are associated with more alertness, epinephrine, and so forth. And fed states are generally associated with more quiescence and relaxation, serotonin, and the kind of things that lend themselves more towards sleep and less toward alertness. Foods that are rich in tryptophan tend to be things like white meat, turkey, also complex carbohydrates. So if you like, you can start experimenting, depending on what foods you eat. You can start experimenting with carbohydrate-rich meals for accessing sleep and more depth of sleep. This is actually something that I personally do. I tend to eat pretty low carbish during the day. I actually fast until about noon, not because I have to work to do that, but because I'd rather just drink caffeine and water during that time. And then sometime around noon, I can't take it anymore and I'm hungry. And I eat, and I try and eat low carb-ish unless I've worked out extremely hard in the previous 2 hours, which I rarely do, although I do sometimes. And that meal is then designed to prolong my period of wakefulness into the late afternoon, and then sometime around dinner time, which for me is around 6:30, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., sometimes as late as 9 p.m., I tend to eat things like white meat, fish, pastas, rice, that kind of thing. My favorite food of all for accessing tryptophan is actually a starch. It's actually a vegetable. It's the croissant, which is my favorite vegetable. I don't eat those all the time, but I love them, and they seem to increase dopamine as well. Never actually done the mass spectrometry on a croissant, but they definitely increase tryptophan and relaxation for me. In all seriousness, low carbohydrate / fasted / ketogenic diets tend to lend themselves toward wakefulness by way of increasing epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, dopamine, and things of that sort. Carbohydrate-rich meals, and I suppose we should talk about meals as opposed to diet, tend to lend themselves more toward tryptophan, serotonin, and more lethargic states. There is very limited evidence that I am aware of that carbohydrates should be eaten at one time a day as it relates to metabolism, etc. I'm sure that will open up a certain amount of debate. If you work out very hard and you deplete glycogen, then this all changes. So some people are working out very hard and depleting glycogen, other people are not. That gets way outside the context of this particular podcast. But yes, indeed, different foods can bias different neuromodulators and thereby can modulate our waking or our feelings of lethargy and sleepiness. There are a couple effects of food that are independent, or I should say a couple effects of eating, because the food won't do it when it's sitting across the table, but of eating that are powerful for modulating circadian rhythm, wakefulness, etc. And that's because every time we eat, we get eating-induced thermogenesis regardless of what we eat. Now, the eating-induced thermogenesis and increase in metabolism, which is an increase in temperature, really, is probably greatest for amino acid-rich foods like meats, but also other types of foods. It's a minimal increase in body temperature compared to, say, cold exposure or exercise. Now, whether or not it's a quarter of a degree or half a degree or a degree, it really depends on the individual. And, of course, there are blood sugar effects. There are things like whether or not you are type 1 or type 2 diabetic, whether or not you're insulin resistant, whether or not, like there's a kid who interns on the podcast here who's 17 years old, and I'm convinced that he can eat anything, and he just seems to, like, burn it up. He's growing it every time. Actually, the other day he walked into the other room, and 2 days later he walked out of the same room. He came out in between, of course, and I was like, he grew. He was like, but he's at that stage where he's just growing. Food is going to affect a teenager very differently than it's going to affect a full-grown person. So, in general, starchy carbohydrates, white meats such as turkey, some fish, increase tryptophan, therefore serotonin, therefore more lethargic states, more calm. Meat, nuts, and there are probably some plant-based foods that I'm not aware of, and I apologize, I should read up on this, that also are high in tyrosine that can increase things like dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, alertness. So you can vary these however you like. Most people, I think, are eating a variety of these things in given meals. And there are other parameters of nutrition that are important too. Volume of food, for the reason I mentioned before, the volume of food in the gut. Less food in the gut, whether or not it's empty or a small amount of food, will tend to correlate with wakefulness. Large volumes of food of any kind will tend to correlate and drive the calming response, and that's by way of this nerve pathway called the vagus. We actually have sensory fibers in the gut that communicate to a little protrusion of neurons that sit right next to the jugular called the nodose ganglia, N-O-D-O-S-E. Unlike Costello, it's nodose. Right now he's all-dose. Nodose actually means having many protrusions, and it's like kind of a lumpy collection of neurons. A ganglia is just a collection of neurons, and then it goes into the brain stem, and then forward in the brain to the areas of the brain that are involved in production of various neuromodulators. So what we eat and the volume of food are both signaling to the brain. It's not just one or the other. And then there's also this eating-induced thermogenesis, and now you know from the discussion about temperature that if you're eating early in the day, you're tending to shift your rhythm earlier so that you'll want to wake up earlier the next day. If you're eating very late in the day, even if you can fall asleep after that, there's a tendency for you to want to sleep later the next day. Now, this, of course, is all going to be constrained by when your kids need to eat and when your spouse needs to eat, when your friends need to eat, or if you live alone, or what other things you're doing. If you're like me and you kind of don't eat until noon, then eat sometime around noon, and then I'm terrible about meals. I just start eating the ingredients while I'm supposed to be cooking, and then eventually they're all gone, and I guess that's a meal. It varies. Some people are neurotically attached to a particular meal schedule. Some people are not. I take my light exposure schedule far more seriously than I take my meal schedule, although in general I try and eat healthy foods for the most part, croissants included. I was asked several times whether or not men and women, or males and females, differ in terms of these neurotransmitter phenotypes and the rhythms of sleep and temperature. You know, we could probably devote a whole month, and we probably will devote an entire month to what are called sex differences, because those tend to be related to things we absolutely know, like XX or XY chromosomes, or XYY in some cases, or XX chromosomes, as opposed to gender. Sex and karyotype, as we call it, genetic makeup, is crystal clear. There are things that correlate with one or the other, but it's complicated, and it's not something that's been explored in what I think is enough detail. Actually, recently, I guess it was about 5 years ago, the National Institutes of Health made it a mandate that all studies use sex as a biological variable and actually explore both sexes of mice, both sexes of humans when doing any kind of study, because there was a bias towards only using male animals or male subjects prior to that time. So a lot of data are now coming out revealing important sex differences that I think are going to have powerful impact on health practices, etc., response to drugs, response to different sleep schedules, etc. Perhaps the most salient and obvious one is that during pregnancy, females experience a whole range of endocrine and neuro effects, and we definitely will devote a month to pregnancy and childbirth and child rearing. And for that, I'd really like to bring in some experts. I've got terrific colleagues at Stanford and elsewhere that work on these things, so that we can go into those in more depth. So I'm not blowing off those questions. I'm kind of pushing them down the road a little bit where I can give you a more thorough answer. So as we finish up, I just want to offer you the opportunity to do an experiment. We've talked about a lot of variables that can impact sleep and wakefulness. Keeping with the theme of the podcast, we are going to continue to talk about sleep and wakefulness and tools for those and the science behind those tools as we go forward. But there are really just 4 simple parameters that you have control over that you can immediately start to record and take note of, just to see how you're doing with these things, with no judgment or perhaps no change to what you're actually doing. It might be interesting, just a suggestion, to write down for each day when you went outside to get sunlight and when you did that relative to waking. So you would write down, like the way I do this in my calendar is I'll write down that, I don't get exact about it, I might say, I woke up at 6:15, and then I'll put a W, 6:15, and then SL for sunlight. I will sometimes get outside right away. Other times I'm less good at that, and I'll go out around, let's say 7. And for how long? Maybe like 10, 15 minutes or so. And then I'll put a little check at roughly the times that I eat my so-called meals, although as I mentioned, sometimes my meals are a bunch of small checks that just kind of extend through the late hours of the day. Yours might be more confined to certain times. And then you might just take note of when you exercise. Just put down an E for when you exercise, weight training or aerobic exercise. And you might note when you might have felt chilled or cold, if you do, or you might have felt particularly hot, or if you woke up in the middle of the night and you felt particularly hot. And then the last thing you might want to do is just write down if and when you did a non-sleep deep rest protocol, an NSDR protocol. That could be meditation, that could be yoga nidra, that could be hypnosis, anything that you're using to deliberately teach your nervous system how to go from more alertness to more calmness in the waking state, even if it's waking up in the middle of the night and doing an NSDR protocol, or in the afternoon or first thing in the morning. to recover some sleep and ability to perform DPOs that you might have lost from a normal or poor night's sleep. So you're going to write down when you woke up, when you viewed sunlight, that might be in the morning and the evening, or just the morning, hopefully it's the morning and the evening, when you exercised, when you ate your meals, and using a simple record-keeping scheme like W for waking, SL for sunlight. Maybe you come up with a system where it's a check or an X or something for exercise. This is not designed to make you neurotically attached to tracking all your behaviors and everything you do. I, for instance, don't track what I eat in particular. I kind of know what works for me, and I just try and stay within that range. But by doing this, you can start to reveal some really interesting patterns that no answer that I could provide you about any existing tool or protocol could, counter. It's really about taking the patterns of behaviors of waking, light viewing, eating, and exercise, and superimposing that on what you're learning in this podcast and elsewhere, of course, and what you already know, and trying to see where certain problems or pain points might be arising. Maybe you're eating really late in the day and you're waking up in the middle of the night really warm. Well, now you would say, well, that could be due to kind of an increase in temperature that is extending my day. Or maybe you start to find that using cold exposure early in the day is great for you, but using it late, if it's too late in the day, that's not great. Or if you're into the sauna, or even like some people, including myself, if I take a hot shower or sit in a hot tub or a sauna late at night, well, then I get a compensatory decrease in body temperature and I sleep great, provided I hydrate well enough, because that can be dehydrated condition. But if I do the sauna early in the day, unless I exercise immediately afterward, then I tend to get the temperature drop, which makes sense because when you get in the sauna, you get vasodilation, you throw off a lot of heat, and then you generally get a compensatory drop in temperature. If you do that early in the day, that's right about the time that temperature is trying to entrain the circadian clocks of your body. That's what happens to me. Other people, it might be slightly different. And some people have more resilient systems than others. So I just encourage you to start becoming scientists of your own physiology, of your own brain and body, and seeing how the various tools that you may or may not be using are affecting your patterns of sleep, your patterns of attention and wakefulness. It's vitally important that if you do this, that you know that it's not about trying to get onto an extremely rigid schedule. It's really about trying to identify variables that are most powerful for you and that push you in the direction that you want to go, and changing the variables that are pushing your body and your mind in the directions that you don't want to go. Self-experimentation is something that should be done slowly, carefully. You don't want to be reckless about this. And this is where I would say manipulating one or two variables at a time is really going to be best, as opposed to changing a dozen things all at once, to really identify what it is that's most powerful for you. As always, thank you so much for your questions. We are going to continue to answer questions. I certainly didn't get to all of them, but we tried to get to most all of the ones that were frequently asked. Episode 4 of the podcast, I'm going to get into shift work, jet lag, and age-dependent changes in sleeping and wakefulness and cognition. So for those of you with kids, for those of you that are kids, for those of you with older relatives, or who might be older, meaning probably when you start to get into late 60s, 70s, and 80s is when there's some marked biological shifts in temperature regulation and things that relate to sleep. And for those of you that travel, we're going to talk about jet lag. The shift work discussion might seem only relevant to those that work nights, but actually that's not the case. Most people, because of the way they're interacting with devices, are actually in a form of shift work now, where the days are certainly not 9 to 5, so-called banker's hours, and then the lights are out at 9 and they're asleep until 5 a.m. Some people have that schedule, most people do not. So episode 4, we will go deeply into shift work, jet lag, age-dependent changes in sleep alertness and cognition, and I will touch back on a few of your questions. But don't think that if your question wasn't answered during these office hours that we won't get to it. I absolutely will at some point. In addition to that, several of you have graciously asked how you can help support the podcast, and we very much appreciate that. You can support the podcast by liking it on YouTube, by subscribing on YouTube, by recommending the YouTube videos to others, as well as subscribing and downloading the podcast on Apple, where you can also leave a review. and on Spotify, or all three if you like. You can also help us by supporting our sponsors, so check out some of the sponsor links that were described at the beginning of the episode. And in general, recommending the podcast to people that you know and that you think would benefit from the information would be terrific. As always, I will be continuing to post on Instagram. You can expect another podcast episode out next Monday about the topics that we've been discussing this month. And above all, thank you for your interest in science. Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. This podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring you zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools. Along those lines, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one vitamin, mineral, probiotic drink. I've been taking Athletic Greens since 2012, and so I'm delighted that they're a sponsor of the podcast. The reason I started taking Athletic Greens is because I found it rather dizzying to know which vitamins and minerals to take, and Athletic Greens covers all my bases for vitamins and minerals. It also includes probiotics, and there are now a lot of data supporting the fact that probiotics are important for the gut-brain axis, for immunity, for metabolic health, endocrine health, many, many things. So I take Athletic Greens once, sometimes twice a day. I mix it with water and a little bit of lemon juice, and to me, it tastes delicious. If you'd like to try Athletic Greens, you can go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman, and if you do that, they'll also give you a year's supply of vitamin D3K2. There are a lot of data now showing that vitamin D3 is important for immune function and a number of other important biological processes. In addition, if you go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman, you'll get 5 free travel packs. Travel packs make it easy to mix up Athletic Greens when you're in the car, on the plane, or generally on the road. So that's athleticgreens.com to get Athletic Greens, the year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, and the 5 free travel packs. Our second sponsor of today's podcast is Headspace. Headspace is a meditation app that makes meditation easy. I've been meditating on and off since I was 16 years old. I'm 45 now, so that's about 30 years of on and off meditation. And I confess most of that time it was off, meaning I find it really hard to stick to a meditation practice. A few years ago, I discovered Headspace while flying on JetBlue flights, because at that time they were offering Headspace as something you could watch instead of TV or movies. And it made me feel great. I'd find that I'd arrive where I was going more rested, more relaxed. And I got the Headspace app, and I started using it daily, and I've continued to use it daily. Headspace has a large number of meditations, all supported by science. There's also now just a tremendous amount of science supporting a meditation practice for all sorts of things like improved sleep, reduced impulsivity, improved cognition. There are just a myriad of positive effects of meditation. The hardest thing is doing it, and Headspace makes that easy. If you want to try the Headspace app and all the meditations they have, you can go to headspace.com/special offer, and you'll get 1 month completely free of all the meditations they have. That's headspace.com/special offer to get 1 month free of Headspace. The third sponsor of today's podcast is Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is a low-carb, grain-free, keto-friendly cereal. As I've mentioned a few times before on this podcast, the way I eat throughout the day has everything to do with when I want to be alert and when I want to be sleepy. So in the first part of the day, I fast because that enhances alertness. Then I eat keto. So my lunch and my afternoon meals are ketogenic. And then in the evening, I eat starches and vegetables because those aid the transition to sleep. So for me, Magic Spoon as a keto cereal is a great snack. It's really tasty. I don't actually mix mine with milk. I just eat it directly. They have a bunch of different flavors. I like the frosted flavor, also because it tastes like donuts, and I have a pastry affliction, and I love pastries. So Magic Spoon allows me to remain on keto during the day. It's healthy. It tastes great. I really enjoy it. So if you want to try Magic Spoon, you can go to magicspoon.com/Huberman for a variety pack of different flavors. And if you put Huberman at checkout, you'll get $5 off the variety pack. That's magicspoon.com/Huberman to try a variety pack of different flavors of Magic Spoon, keto, grain-free, low-carb cereal. Put Huberman at checkout, you get $5 off. A quick note before we begin today's discussion about the neuroscience of motivation. I'm pleased to announce that we have now captioned episodes 1 and 2 in Spanish, and soon all the episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast will be captioned on YouTube in Spanish. We've used some of the revenue from the podcast to hire expert captioners, so it should be accurate. You might catch a mistake here or there or a dialect difference from time to time, but by our read and by our experts' reads, it's all accurate. So we're very pleased that people who speak Spanish and digest information best in Spanish can now digest the information here on the podcast. Thanks to everyone for supporting the podcast, which allows us to broaden our reach in these ways, and we do hope to expand to other languages in the very near future. This month, we're talking all about the neuroscience of emotions. And today, we're going to talk about an extremely important topic that's central to our daily life, and that's motivation. We're going to talk about pleasure and reward. What underlies our sense of pleasure or reward? We're going to talk about addictions. You can't have a discussion about pleasure and reward without having a discussion about addictions and the addictive properties of certain substances, as well as how to break free of addiction. As well, we're going to talk about the neurochemistry of drive and mindset. So all these themes are woven together in the context of emotions. Each one of them, of course, could also be its own entire month of the podcast. And in fact, we are going to have an entire month devoted to addiction. And I have a very special guest that's going to be joining us to talk about the science and clinical practices that we know are important for understanding and treating addiction. But for now, let's just talk about the neuroscience of motivation and reward, of pleasure and pain, because those are central to what we think of as emotions, whether or not we feel good, whether or not we feel we're on track in life, whether or not we feel...
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I do.
What's up?
I'm fine, thanks. All good.
Saw you were in a co-op game.
Yeah, I saw you were in the game and I was like, let's play a bot game for like 15 minutes.
Fair enough.
Should match, and it did. I played Blitzcrank in a bot game. It was so fun.
I feel like bots aren't programmed to dodge properly.
It was a beginner's game, so they did not dodge, and I had 100% hook.
Nice, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how that necessarily works. Yeah, you ready to play? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, I had a weird game last one.
Okay.
I feel like Gwen does a lot of damage. I didn't realize how much fucking damage this champion did.
She does. Especially when she's feeded.
Yeah, it's a little bit rough.
Bad.
That's
Not
for sure.
feeded. Bad.
Who do you want to play? You gonna play Blitzcrank?
Blitzcrank, naughty. Maybe I can go
normal,
for looks,
though.
but I'm not too good.
You can try any.
Yeah, but it's always good practice for playing Blitzcrank in a normal game.
I guess, yeah.
I shouldn't play naughty in a normal.
We'll
because
see.
I'm
We'll see
actually
who they.
quite good.
We'll see who they pick.
And I'm sorry for my ban, but it's just necessary.
What? No, I don't mind. You can ban whoever you want.
It really is. Yeah, they banned Thrash. So it's probably... Yeah, they will pick the AD carry now, I think. After Nocturne. I've seen a video from someone who played Blitzcrank top. I want to try that one day.
Let's crank up. It's alright. You have to figure out what kind of build you want to go. What am I playing? Jinx, Shaco. Jinx, Shaco. Twitch? I'm kind of down, but it's not good. I have no CC to follow up with you. I guess it's not super important. I'm down to play some Twitch. Fuck it.
Yeah, I like it. Twitch is.
I gotta go AP though, don't I?
I think it's up to the team, but so far I would go AP. Yeah.
What is the AP? It's Hail of Blades, right? Hail of Blades, Taste of Blood, Ravenant, or fucking Eyeball Collection, and then we'll go
attack speed,
Alacrity, and do I need Presence of Mind, or should I do damage? I feel like Presence of Mind is gonna help a lot. Oh, Set's annoying. Set is annoying. I think we're okay though. Oh wait, Nautilus? Set in the lane. Okay, Nautilus Jinx. Okay. Yeah, I think that's alright. It's probably fine.
You have the attack speed runes.
Well, yeah.
Because I think these are important.
What? Alacrity?
Attack speed.
Yeah, I got them both.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Of course, man. What am I gonna get? Tenacity? That's not helpful. If I get CC'd, I'm dead anyway.
That is true. But I think it's the same with Jinx. Oh, you got Twitch level 4, so you play him sometimes, I see.
Yeah, no, he's my second best AD character.
Oh, really? And the best
Yeah,
is Jinx?
No.
Is it?
What? I don't know Jinx. Jinx is like my third. Jinx is like my third. My main is a Kaisa, and then Twitch is secondary, and then I play Jinx. Okay. No. Sorry, I'm wrong. It's Sivir, Twitch. No, sorry. It's Kaisa, Twitch, Sivir, Jinx. That's the order of how comfortable I am.
Okay, cool. Yeah, for me it's Twitch, and then Jinx, and then Dodge. Or Heimerdinger, ADC. So when you go AP Twitch, you max your W as the second. Is that right? Or what do you do?
I have no idea, man.
Max.
Should I check it out? I'll check it out.
No, you shouldn't.
U.GG.
I was just wondering.
I don't really play AP much.
Okay. I think we still act you first.
Huh? They're gonna invade? We're gonna invade. Someone's gonna invade, right?
Yeah, but I think it's not us.
What? They're Blitzcrank.
Yeah, I know, but...
What?
There.
What?
30 seconds until minions spawn. Minions have spawned.
I can't even taste the air up here.
Twitch. Build. 4, 5. last hit the buff or poison will take. I'm on to you. Alright, here Nautilus can engage on me to do something. Okay, he's not gonna do that. That's fine. He could engage on me here. It looks like he's not gonna do that. That's fine. I'm chilling. That's kind of gross, Twitch. What the fuck? Do you listen to your champion when they speak? Twitch just said, I licked this bolt for you.
Yeah, I know.
So gross.
And I licked it. It's mine.
So gross. Alright, we got a freeze here. I don't know what the fuck they... Like, what the fuck are they doing?
Oh. Chill.
I don't know what's going on. What are they playing like this for? But yeah, we can just chill here. Like, it will never push if I do this properly. I probably should have stealth second. But I went W. Alright, it looks like Jinx went AFK or something. You just if you stand here, you can get an easy hook angle. And just time it for when oh, okay, perfect, perfect, yeah, perfect. She's dead, man.
Nice one.
And we kill this guy too. No,
I have hook in 3,
okay.
2, 1. Now I got it.
Nah, I
Get
can't.
it back.
Who's the
Yeah,
jungler?
you got
Shaco.
my-
Oh shit, he already
Didn't
got a
have
kill.
Okay.
Yeah, help me push this, help me push, help me push. Don't wanna push me, bro. Just hit the range minis if you can. Try and get one more wave. This is really awkward. Oh, and the cannon's here too, so... You got a thing soon?
I don't have mono, I just have...
No, I mean
for
I'm talking about the, Okay. What is going on here? What is going on here? Nautilus is just, like... gone, I guess? Alright.
Yeah.
I guess that's fine. I don't know what she's doing. Nautilus recalled and then she decided... Oh, I think she was trying to juke your hook. What is Nautilus doing? We killing? Oh, what? What?
I went back.
Why? He's trolling!
Oh god,
He's
don't die.
level 4, man. He's level 4. As long as Jinx don't show up. Oh, fuck. Oh, man. Whoops. If I got my E off, he's dead. Oh, that's alright. Oh, what do I get? What should I get? I should probably get... I don't know what to get, actually. Let's get this. Fuck it. Let's do it like this. Yeah, this lane's pretty over, I guess. Nice. He's dead.
Are you coming?
I got hit. I can. I'm here. Oh, you're slow. Alright, she's gone. That's cool. Just help me push. What's this guy doing? You gonna help me?
I'm low. I'm one hit. I have to move. And he's after me.
Oh man, you're really gonna kill me here.
there, I really can't do anything. I don't even have mana for... Now I have.
That's fine.
Yeah, let's
I
go
killed
back.
him anyway.
No, if I stayed, he just click on me and I'm dead. With his E shaker.
Yeah, but if he kills you, I can kill them both, you know?
Yeah, but I'm one hit. He just eat and
You
then
were
use
definitely
goes
3
away.
hits. You were 3 hits, dude. You were probably 2
was-
hits and an E.
I was 60 HP and I didn't have my passive.
You were higher when you recalled.
Yes,
That's alright.
because I didn't reach them. At this moment I was 60 HP.
Stealthing? I don't think...
Enemy has been slain.
Yeah, I don't think I can get that.
I was hiding.
Oh my gosh, so this lane's pretty over. So, oh, cheeky one. Oh, you gonna help me get this? Oh, I guess that's fine too. Okay.
Nice, I like it. Yes, that's what I want to see with Twitch.
It's good hook.
Nice one.
Jinx level 3, I feel bad.
Oh god. It's just like the bot game I played before. And I also think that maybe Nautilus is not used to play Nautilus. Probably playing it first time.
Pretty normal for people to not. I'm leaving.
Sure.
I've got 10 stacks here already. There's no
Well,
need
I
to
can
stay.
hook her.
No. It's better to reset.
An ally has been slain.
My try as well.
They ought to play.
Yeah, I'm even and I'm coming, but just play safe until I'm there.
I don't want to kill these guys, I want to play safe.
Yeah, just play safe until I'm there.
Nah, fuck that. You got Mobies, so you shouldn't be too long.
An ally has been slain.
Yeah, this is definitely like a roaming game.
An ally has
I
been
already got ult and flash out of the mid lane.
I'm stealthing. Get in position. Get in position, get in position, get in position. You're not coming?
I was hiding.
You don't want to fight them?
I was in. Like, but I should have gone.
It's okay. Oh, this is. Oh, shit. Alright, we don't have to touch the wave and it will push into us very slowly. And shake us top, so yeah.
An enemy has
We
been
chillin'.
slain.
Yeah, I will stay here even if they have
Spawn.
ward. I don't care.
There's nothing they can do.
I dealt it. It was me.
Let me know when you're gonna go for a hook, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a few seconds warning and I can, actually, let me push this.
No, sorry.
What? It's fine. Like, she can't farm, so I don't know what.
Yes, level 6.
Hook not. Just hook not. Oh, okay.
I wanna hook Jinx.
Nah, hook not, man. You can kill him. Jinx is playing too safe.
Yeah.
Just hook any of them and they die. So.
Yeah, I can flash it back home.
You don't need to do that. Just walk forward and do it.
Look what the pipes washed in.
Shaco's somewhere bot side right now. You wanna skeleton go help?
Yeah, yeah, hit this.
How do you aim with all this light?
Just gonna blast these.
Oh yes, yes.
Turret plating will soon fall.
You're not gonna go for the hook.
Hope that gets in.
I guess it's fine because
That's fine.
there's nothing we can do right now. But I think Shaco's here. It's pretty obvious that Shaco's here. I think he can still fight, no? Yeah, he can still
Yeah,
fight.
yeah.
Why are you behind me? Why are you behind me, dude? You can't be behind me, man. I didn't see how strong Shaco was.
Yeah, you got 3 kills.
I got all my stacks. But yeah, dude, if you're playing a tank support who hooks, you can never be behind me, man.
That's true.
Hey, what? I bought an extra... Oh, I did. Is it better to get 10? It might be. It might be better to get 10. Oh, weird, but sure.
This doesn't smell at all. Stand still. My eyes are on the side of my head.
Look at this. I guess I'm war. I have R though.
I can't even taste the air up here.
Don't think this is good. You hear, yeah.
Go.
Pick up.
I think even if you were alone, you could do them both. Take them a minion and go.
I'm on to you.
Oh, fuck me. Alright, I'm dead.
Yeah, I saw that. Unlucky.
It's not really luck. I should have pinked it. I should have pinked here, maybe. I don't know. He was just in the right place at the right time. Oh well. And I fucking had 8 stacks and now it's gone again. I had 10 stacks, I lose them all. I have 8 stacks, I lose them all.
Okay, I will grab the blue.
Grab the blue? Just steal it, no? Oh, okay. Nice.
Thanks for the blue, boys.
You come bottom. Oh, Shaco wants his blue back. Be careful, he's here. But if you come, oh no, just chill. Or I'm stealthing. I'm gonna put a pink in this bush here. All right, looks like they left, so that's fine. You can leave now. You don't need to stay. I don't think.
Just gonna take the 2. That's cool, I have a blue buff, I can just spam my spells. What's up, my little lady?
An ally has been slain.
Yeah, I don't think you max W, dude. Second.
An enemy has been
Because you don't get any damage from it.
enemy double kill.
You know?
No,
Do we get first
because
turret?
it's blue
I'll
buff.
just fucking get it now. Alright, actually, chill a bit. But, oh no, we didn't get first turret. I should have chilled then. I shouldn't have taken that turret. Oh well.
Yeah, well, it's not bad to take a turret. Okay.
It can be. It can be. It can be. Because now I can't farm, like, safely. You know? If I kept the turret there, then the wave will come back to me. But because I didn't...
You can go for red after.
Nah, I don't need red right now, I don't think. Actually, fuck it, let me get it. That's the wrong spell.
Killing spree.
Okay, I guess it's pen, right? Pen's good.
Yeah.
And then I'll just get death cap, I guess. What's going on here? Sets here. 1v3. Oh, what? Okay. He's gonna W, right? Oh, nice. I guess it's fine. I'll go bottom than it is.
It'll only hurt if you die.
You're trying to kill, yeah? You have Hex Slash? Oh, you got seen.
I have the real one.
I was hiding.
Yeah.
I should have tanked it so I can get those melees. Let's do this. See what's going on here. It's a bit dicey for me to go into the river, I think.
Rivers here, there are no walls.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew they were in there. Oh shit. How did we lose so hard?
Tankage wasn't there.
Damn.
Shut down. Ace.
I almost killed them all, but I didn't do my E properly. I didn't stealth when I got the first kill, and I didn't peel. It's not good.
They are going for Nash.
I don't think we can stop it. Sorry, I still feel good about it this game. Try to get Knight's Vow for me, maybe.
Sorry?
Is that what you're getting? Knight's Vow?
Yes, getting that.
Perfect, perfect. It's gonna help a lot.
Who's following me?
What's going on here? That's really fighting?
They are prepared. You're looking a little green.
Your turret has been destroyed.
I'll be right.
Where are you running to, my dude? Alright, I guess. What's going on here? Is it just chilling?
It's me.
Your team has destroyed a turret. Godlike. Has been destroyed.
Maybe not hook someone, no? If you can.
No, I can't.
Fuck, he one-shot me, man. Yo, we're not looking at the Shaco. Okay, Shaco's up behind the thing. He's gonna try and kill someone. He's gonna kill this Nocturne. Yeah, bye Nocturne. You guys chase
Ally has been slain.
in different directions. And now you're all gonna die to Shaco. Oh no. Okay. Okay, Yasuo can do something? Oh no, I missed cute. Maybe? Oh, it's really awkward.
This was not for me.
Okay. Nice.
An
It's not
ally
bad.
has been slain.
Okay, I got people.
It's not
nice
bad. It wasn't my bad. I shouldn't be off to the side because Shaco just jumped on me and two-shot me.
Yeah. I know how it is with AD carry. Going AD? Yeah, it's going AD.
Shut down.
Yeah, I'll buy Frozen Heart. And I will put Nice Ball. Yeah, connect.
Alright, got 8 stacks of measure. It's time to not lose it. Okay, I can buy Death Cap. I should just do that. Time before the next dragon, I think. What's next? Is it Rift or is it Zanya?
there's
It's probably Zanya's. I'm not there. I'm not there. Nice hook.
Down.
Fantastic.
So that was my aftershock.
I'm gonna want that back.
Alright, I'm coming into the river. Okay, I'm trying to push this a little bit.
Demand.
I'm stopping. Okay, you guys need to come to us, I think. Yeah, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Oh my god. Shaco's still around?
Oh, God. Oh, he's dead. I killed
Okay,
him.
cool.
Oh,
Nice.
he killed me too. That was unfortunate. But it was such a nice save from Tom Kench.
Looking a little green.
Who could gank me? No one could gank me. I'll kill anyone who shows up. So. Hey, I got 20 motherfucking stacks, baby. I don't know what I'm recalling for. I guess I'll recall for the Seekers? Are they all AD? No. Azir's not.
Oh, yes, yes.
I'll really just go back to the CDR, I guess. Not there.
Because there.
Let me get this. It's really good. What's going on here, man? Can I even do anything?
Oh fuck!
It's not looking great. It's not looking great. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid.
Yeah, you're showing your skill.
That was such a
yourself.
bad stopwatch. Did I kill him anyway? Nice. That was quite funny actually.
Yeah.
Now what? What do I buy now? I got my items, right? Just void stuff? None of them are building 8 magic resist. Except not has
Yeah,
some.
but it's always good to have some penetration. Because you get some basic armor and magic resist during leveling up, so I think it's not too bad buying this.
But is there something better? That's my question. There could be something better. Like, what about Runats? I think Runats is just better, no?
Yeah, I think this might be actually a good choice.
Because I got true damage anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, buy this. That's good. That's good, I think.
I'll be right under the nose. You're looking a little green.
Oh, what's going on here? Okay. Okay.
I'm on to you.
Oh shit, hold up. What is going on here? Oh, for fuck's sake, man. Don't fight, don't fight. There goes all my fucking stacks. Oh. Man. Nice. Oh shit. Lamau. Ay ay ay.
Oh, sweet love.
Alright, I got all 11. Oh, what the fuck is this? Let's go. Where are we going? Got arson. I'm stealthing. I really want to go on the Jinx. Okay, she got hit. Nice. Okay. Okay, I didn't need to do that. Oh, fuck it. Oh my god, guys!
Ah, shit.
That will finish the game if you don't recall. Alright, not bad, I guess. Shaco only goes for me. I have full build soon.
I'm thinking if there is any item that I can buy.
Nah, you have them already. That will what? Stop Shaco from killing me? I don't know. You can get what's it actually? Zeke's Convergence?
Yes.
I think it's good. I think it's good. I think Yasuo should be bottom, because if I show bottom, they could. I don't know. I guess I'll just go bottom for it. I really just want to get my hurricane now. Don't fight. Okay, I guess we're fighting. I'm gonna finish my item then.
That's it.
Rust is like more delicious mold.
Ay ay ay, what is going on, guys? Is this Summoner's Rift or ARAM? I got my stealth off, I gotta know where Twitch or Shaco is, so there it is. Okay, wait, 2 stacks, baby. You want 2 mana? We can 2 mana. It's just Azir can be annoying, I think. You doing it?
Okay.
You doing it or not? Oh dude, you gotta do Dragon or Baron now, so it's gonna be too late. You have pink? You have red trinket though, yeah? Cool. Wait, what? Oh, yeah. Oh no. Alright, no, we can do it, I got E. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Oh, for fuck's sake. He's gonna go on me, there he is, he's on me. Didn't get my E off, I'm stupid. Alright, he's in my E, lol, so I guess he just dies.
Yeah, we need to prep. Oh.
What do I buy now? I sell shoes? There's nothing to buy without shoes though, right? Oh no, I gotta sell shoes, I think.
No.
Gotta sell shoes. Void staff, baby.
Don't trust any liquid you can see through.
respawning soon.
Going south, going south. Are we not doing something? You get a hook? You should be in the front, man. Fuck me, guys! Hello! Fuck me, man. Okay. Go for not. Oh, fuck me! No, I'm just dead. Let's see what I can do. Poison, baby? Poison, poison, poison? Oh, nope.
No, I did my best.
Splitting up, please. Just protect me and we win easy. But split and Shaco wins through chaos. That's your fault. Just disengage in seconds. Not when, just when he makes turret, just leave. Shaco was on me whole time.
Have you met my flea?
God, I can't go anywhere. Can you water jungle?
Yes, I will just buy the last item because I think it's important.
It is important, but it's just I can't do anything. Because if Shaco's in our jungle and I show up on this wave, I'm insta-dead. So I literally can't do anything right now. I guess there's no need for me to farm.
I'll be right under.
There's literally no need for me to farm, so I guess I'll just chill. Oh gosh.
Hi. They are the play.
I'm level 18, I really want to fight now. Alright, we both got C. Alright, I'm stealthy. Got water up the wall? Oh no, that's the... Can we just do something? Hello? No traps? I'm not gonna fight? Jinx just wastes her traps? Okay, okay. Oh no. We're just not gonna do nothing, I guess. Let the supers win. Yeah, I'll just go mid, I guess, since we're not gonna try anything. Or no, I should stay. Oh, Jinx just wasted her traps again. Oh, okay. Lol, I did not know you could hook that. That's a bit mental. I guess we just chill. There's nothing to do. No, I don't think you win with the hook here, because we're still 4v5. I mean, Nocturne does have ult, so maybe we win. I have a thing though. I think Nocturne can chill. I'll take the thing though. Yeah, let's hit this. Nocturne's getting mega farmed here though. Could be here. Give me a sec, we're about.
Watch your step. like a fine egg. I'll be... Oh, yes, yes. I was hiding!
Your inhibitor is respawning soon. Your inhibitor is respawning soon.
I demand a sandwich!
My ult has 10 seconds cooldown now. Take us bot side.
It's me!
Your inhibitor has been destroyed. Your inhibitor has been destroyed. Your inhibitor has been destroyed.
There's the real one, he's coming for you. There is still Shaco, he's there, just finishing. Yeah, damn Shaco.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You need to ward objectives, dude. Like, that needs to be your top priority as a support, is having wards on objectives, like at least a minute, maybe even 2 minutes before the objective even spawns. Like, it's good to have a ward there, but Baron died, we didn't see it. Elder died, we didn't see it. And then we lost. But your hooks are alright. You don't really play very aggressive though.
Yeah, I know.
I think TF Blade especially, he was recommending to Ninja that you have to play aggressive and learn and make mistakes, because if you just play passive, you're just gonna become a passive player. You know?
Yeah.
You gotta learn to be aggressive and take risks and kind of play forward. Like I said in the early game, you can't be behind me. you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because then they just focus me and I die. But if you're next to me or in front of me, ideally, or there's like a thing in like support play that you can think about called keeping the line.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah.
Just try to stay in the same line as your AD carry.
Yeah, but you want to mirror the enemies. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yeah, you need to get awards on objectives like a minute, 2 minutes before they spawn, if possible, you know.
Yeah, of course.
Like we didn't have vision on Baron and they took it, and we didn't have vision on Elder and they took it. So it was really awkward to try and play after that. We just had a disadvantage. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I'll be on tomorrow probably.
Okay,
I'll be on tomorrow.
that's
I'm
good.
gonna play some other games for now.
Sure.
See you later.
Have a nice one. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Alright, hello, can you hear me? Testing.
Yeah,
Perfect. How are you?
I'm good. And yourself?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. I'm chilling.
Good. I'm just texting right now. Let's see if I can- What you been on today?
Huh?
What you been on today?
Just played some WoW with my mom in the morning time. And then I've just been trying to stream League basically. And yeah, it's alright. It's alright. And